Thank you.
Yep.
Who's missing there? Oh, Neil.
Good, how are you?
I'd like to call this meeting to order. The mission of the Freehold Township School District is to honor and support every learner every day on the journey to become curious and engaged members of a diverse global community. A notice listing the time, date, and place of this meeting was posted on the public bulletin board of all Freehold Township schools, at the entrance door to the administrative offices of the Board of Education, on the district website, at the offices of the Freehold Township Clerk, sent to the Asbury Park Press on January 6, 2023, and sent to the news transcript on January 4th, 2023. I'd like to invite you to join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
Mrs. Brand, Mrs. Coslino.
Here.
Mr. Gargiulo, Mrs. O'Sullivan,
Present.
Mrs. Thoman,
Here.
Mrs. Venatoli,
Here.
Mr. Williams,
Here.
Mr. Amoroso,
Here.
Mrs. Lambert.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay. I'd like a motion to approve the regular meeting minutes from September 26th, 2023.
So,
Okay. All in favor say aye. Aye.
aye.
Any abstentions? No? We're all in attendance. Okay. Okay. Communications.
All right, communications this evening, we have enrollment. June of 2023, we had 3,483 students. September of 23, we had 3,453, compared to September of 22, which was 3,441. And that's the only communication this evening.
Okay. I'd like to thank all of you who have come out this evening to join us. I'm going to hold off on my president's remarks until we go into old business and new business later and go right into the administrative report. We are going to have a moment of silence, so I would turn this over to Mr. Dickstein at this point for that.
Thank you. This past week, we were notified that we had lost two parents in the district. Robert Ross, whose children attend, he has one child at Eisenhower Middle School and one child at Applegate School, and Jillian Glassford, mother of a student at Erickson School. I'd like to ask everybody to join us in a moment of silence in remembrance of Robert and Jillian. Thank you.
On behalf of the board, we'd like to express our condolences to the families of both of those parents and especially to their students in the district. Very sad.
I'm going to do the two, 4 and 5, the HIB district and school grades, and the bullying investigation report, so that we can focus on the presentation that's in number 3. Our HIB district and school grades for the 22 and 23 school year, just to give the board an understanding and the public, that is a compliance evaluation, meaning each school has a school safety team. That school safety team goes through a checklist provided by the State Department of Education, and it asks several questions which assess the compliance of the school and the procedures and the training, and that they're aligned with the expectations of the state, and then that results in grades. The max is 78 for this year. Donovan, Erickson, and West Freehold, 77. Katina, 78. ECLC, 74. Applegate, Barkalow, and Eisenhower, 76, with a total of 78. And we, through Dr. Brethauer as the anti-bullying coordinator, our school counselors as the anti-bullying specialists in the schools, along with the administrators and teachers, ensure that our policies are all followed on a consistent basis. This month, since the opening of school, we've had 13 reports of harassment, intimidation, and bullying. 9 were founded, 4 were unfounded. And I'll turn over to Bob for its certification.
All right. I, Robert DeVita, the school business administrator / board secretary, certifies that as of September 30th, 2023, no line item has been overexpended in violation of NJAC 6A 23-16.10C3, and that sufficient funds are available to meet the district's financial obligations for the remainder of the fiscal year.
Okay.
And moving on, Mrs. Montgomery will do the presentation for the New Jersey Student Learning Assessment from the spring of 2023.
Is this
Yes.
someone consider my chair?
All right. Good evening and welcome. I am back this evening sharing the third of 3 presentations with the Board of Education regarding our student assessment as mandated by the state of New Jersey. You may recall previously in August, I presented to you our student performance on the Access for ELLs. That's the test that students who are English language learners take, and our DLM assessment. Tonight, I'm going to be focusing on the New Jersey Student Learning Standards Assessment, the NJSLA. This tests students in grades 3 through 8 in the areas of English, language arts, and math. Our 5th and 8th graders take the assessment in science. And per state requirements, I need to provide to you not just how our students are performing, but also provide you with subgroup demographic data. So we're going to talk about how our students performed as a whole, and then we're also going to look at students, how they perform, how subgroups of students by race, by gender, and by program performed on these assessments as well. So I'm going to start with English language arts. This chart represents students in grades 3 through 8 down the left-hand side. It tells you the total number of students that we tested. And then in each column to the right, you can see the performance levels. So level 1 through level 5 being the highest performance level. Levels 4 and 5 combined are what we look at for proficiency. So students in levels 4 and 5 combined are our combined proficiency rates for English language arts. So some things that are important to note or to highlight here. 63% of our students in grades 3 through 8 are meeting or exceeding expectations in English language arts. That's the total of those 2 columns to the right-hand side. Some important things to note when we compare our data to the students' performance across the state, you'll see there's 2 columns in each performance level, the district performance percentage level compared to the state. And, while I don't know that any of us are thrilled with 63% proficient, we are exceeding the state average across the board. And so I think that's really something to be proud of. We are not just exceeding at the level of proficiency, we have fewer students at the lower levels of proficiency, right? So we have less students who are in this not meeting expectations area and more students at the district as compared to the state at the meeting and exceeding expectations level. This is that same data that we just looked at the chart, but it's represented graphically. Again, those green bars are represent the levels of proficiency. The graphs across the top are our district data, and the graphs across the bottom are representing the state data. So this is our first look at how students perform in language arts, again, broken down by race. So as I mentioned before, we need to report out how students are performing in these subcategories, these subgroups of students. You'll notice in some places on the chart, you'll see a less than 10 in the number of students tested, or a whole line of data that is empty. That represents a population of students that are less than 10 across the district. by law, I am required to suppress that data, not report it publicly, because it could be, I could be, revealing confidential information because it's such a small number of students. We will go through this disaggregated data by race, by gender, and then again by program. So some things to note about our performance of students as we look at them by race. 56% of our Black students and 51% of our Hispanic students are are not meeting proficiency standards across the district.
You want to say a question for Giselle, or?
I don't have a preference. Sure.
So I want to ask you about that, in terms of how the district is tackling that issue.
Sure.
Obviously, now we have 3 Title I policies on the agenda tonight.
Yeah.
Our district is starting to look a little different, and how are we meeting that challenge?
Yeah. So Title I funding is a big way that we do that. And I'll talk a little bit more when we get to the slide as we break down kids by demographic, because that's how Title I schools are identified. But that gives us a pool of funding so that we can provide additional supports for students in those areas. So our Title I schools receive funding that helps us to provide an additional interventionist in each of those buildings. So we have more staff to help serve our underperforming population of students.
Now, a follow-up question. Is that, when did those interventionists join? Is that new, or have they always been there?
So the interventionists, sorry, did Ellen have a question? I don't know what that was. Okay. Sorry. I'm sorry, can you ask your question again, Meg? I apologize.
The Title I funding that allows us to add an additional interventionist
Yes.
in each of those buildings.
Those are existing staff.
Those are
Existing staff, and the staff who are in those positions for the most part are people who have been in those positions. If they haven't been in an interventionist position, they are teachers who have been in other positions in the district. These are not people who are new to the profession. These are really seasoned and veteran teachers who really know their stuff. This is subgroup data by gender. This is looking at how our male and female students perform compared to one another in English language arts. And interestingly, in looking at this data, 69% of our female students are passing NJSLA as compared to 57% of our male students.
Do we know why?
I do not. I can certainly dig into that more, but I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head. No, I'm sorry.
Does it differentiate between like the lower grades and the higher grades, or is it consistent?
So we can look up there and see. So they've got elementary school grouped.
Mm-hmm.
So our elementary school students, 49 plus 12, 61% at elementary is, oh, I'm sorry, I'm adding the all students. Female students, 65%, and male students, 58%. So yeah, at the elementary level. If you look at the middle school level, it's yeah, it's higher. Yeah. It is higher at the middle school level. And interestingly, it's the other way around in math. And we'll get there. This is our subgroup data by program. So these are our students that qualify for free and reduced lunch, those students whose families are socioeconomically disadvantaged, our students who receive services through Section 504, our English language learners, and our special education students. Again, there are some categories where that data is suppressed because we have fewer than 10 students in those categories. But some things to note about this, 11% of our district population receive free and reduced lunch services. So 11%, that's where we identify Title I. And, so that indicates 11% of our student population are coming from homes that are economically disadvantaged in some capacity. Of those 11% of our population of 3rd through 8th graders, 64% of those kids are not passing NJSLA in language arts. Additionally, this data looks at our special education students separately. These students are receive a different variety of special education services than those that I reported to you on the DLM results. These are students who receive their special education services either in an in-class support setting or in a resource room setting. 79% of those students are not proficient in JSLA for English language arts.
But we, at the last meeting, we talked about, or was it, I don't know, recently, we talked about increasing access to the mainstream curriculum.
Correct,
Right?
correct. So I will speak to that as one of our action steps in an upcoming slide. Yes,
Thank you.
yes. So next I want to share with you some longitudinal data. This looks at our ELA scores over 5 testing years, keeping in mind that there is a break in those years for COVID, right? So on this graphic, you will see, let's see if my little pointer works. Each of these bars represents a year of testing. The 3 bars on the left-hand side are the 3 years pre-COVID, and the 2 bars on the right-hand side are the two years post-COVID with a testing break in between. Okay, so some things that I want to highlight in looking at this data. We can do a couple of things when we look at longitudinal data. We can look at our performance over time, right? We can look at how a grade level might be performing over time, but we can also look at growth for a cohort over a series of years. So I want to just highlight a couple of things. Take a look at this this group of students right here. In 2016-17, those students were 3rd graders, and they performed at 66% proficiency in language arts. When they moved to 4th grade, those students performed at 68% proficiency. And then when they moved to 5th grade, they performed at 70% proficiency. So while pre-COVID, we were noticing a downward trend up within a grade level, those cohorts of students were still making progress. Okay. And then I want to highlight some post-pandemic numbers because you see that there's sort of this market drop off in these 2 right-hand columns, right? Those are the 2 years post-COVID. 3rd and 4th grade in particular, those are the students that we know nationally. These are the students that are being highlighted nationally that are of great concern. These are the kiddos who were preschoolers, kindergartners, 1st graders during the pandemic. These are kids who went to kindergarten on a computer or not at all. Right. So we recognize that clearly has an impact on what their first years of their foundational years of school look like, and obviously, what their learning looks like moving forward. I'm not here to sort of paint an ugly picture of that. I have some positive highlights to show. And that is taking a look at this group of kids. So this group of kids were 3rd graders in 21-22. They performed at 55% proficiency in language arts. When they moved to 4th grade, just last year, they went up to 62% proficiency, right? So when we're looking at kids across one year to the next and looking at cohorts and looking for growth, that growth is happening. Is it happening across every grade level for every cohort? It's not, but it's more often than not, it's happening with consistency. I neglected to mention before, this cohort of kids that we followed from 3rd grade to 4th grade to 5th grade, I skipped over going to them as 8th graders, right? So pre-pandemic, these kids were 70% proficient in English language arts, then the pandemic, and then in 8th grade, the next time they took the test, they were at 71% proficiency. So even for those kids, there was not a marked drop in their performance.
Can I ask
Certainly.
so certainly when you look at those numbers of 3rd and 4th grade, nationally, people are talking about those
Yes,
kids a lot. And I'm sure that you haven't done this yet, but it may make sense to look at our historical data for those racial subgroups
Certainly.
and socioeconomic subgroups and see.
Pre-pandemic, you mean? Look at
Yeah.
how those kids did pre-pandemic.
Yeah, and see if that's, I'm sure it's a population you're looking at with high intensity tutoring and stuff like
Absolutely,
that,
absolutely.
but it
That
might,
actually, that population of students are the target students for that grant that we approved last month, that the district has applied for. We asked for a really large sum of money from the state to help provide high intensity tutoring specifically for targeting our third and fourth graders.
Becky,
Yes.
And again, it's jumping between tests, but if you go back to that
Sure.
last row, grade 3, 51%, those were our kindergartners during COVID.
Correct.
So those are the kids that missed, half a
Cor-
kindergarten.
Correct.
Yeah.
So one would anticipate that their first year of state standardized testing would look markedly different than the kids who took it
Yeah, well,
5
it
or
was their
7
first
years
time they were
prior.
taking the test to
Correct,
begin with.
correct.
So, I mean,
Absolutely.
that's the thing. But
Yeah.
my question is, we've seen though where there are so far this year because MAP has rolled out,
Correct.
right? So any interventions that are needed, we've already,
Our new intervention model is in progress.
Okay.
We spent a lot of time over the summer analyzing spring map data. Our fall map data, or our fall map window, closed recently, and we are in the throes of doing that data analysis and identifying, scooping up additional kids if we need to. But we've identified kids based on spring map data that started the year who needed interventions.
Okay, and I'm saying, I know like Matt, I don't know about you, but I know like Matthew did MAP already.
Yes, all the schools have
Well,
completed
yeah.
their map windows. Yep.
Perfect.
Yep. So the other thing that I am required to report to you is what are we doing, right? What are we doing in response to this student data, so that you know how we are supporting student achievement. So first and foremost, and this is happening for both language arts and for mathematics, is this new model for intervention that we've talked about, providing tiers of support and resources to move our pyramid to a truer NJTSS model of tiered interventions and supports. And along with that is coming a lot of support for teachers. It is big change, and I don't want to dismiss that. But we are working through it collaboratively, and we are going to provide teachers and interventionists and all of the people in the buildings the tools and the resources that they need to make sure that we can pull this off successfully for kids. As we do annually, we obviously look at our NJSLA data, and we monitor for dips in particular areas of standards. I shared with the curriculum committee this evening a sample of the evidence statements that we get from the Department of Education. It's a report that looks at how our kids perform on particular items on the test and they link those items to the actual standards that were assessed. So we've done a tremendous amount of work with our administrators, and they in turn at the building level with their staff about analyzing those evidence statements and looking at ways that they can instructionally support kids in the classroom around those particular standards where our kids, may have fallen short. We will have a district goal this year in language arts for our students in grades 6 through 8. Again, we do this annually, but we share with you, what our goals are, and we focus on, we have particular goals that focus on student achievement. You will notice, as I share with you this evening, we will have district goals in both the areas of language arts and mathematics, in an effort to move our progress forward. At the middle school level, I shared this with you last spring, but one of the things that our curriculum committees worked on in the spring and through the summer is building these resource toolkits. And Carrie, this is in response to your question earlier. What are the tools that we are giving to our special education teachers to help kids in those resource classrooms and in-class support settings better access the standards, the grade level standards. So we had committees that included both general education and special education teachers this summer come together to build those toolkits around standards for math and language arts, and we've rolled those out to teachers in the building so the teachers have access to that. And that was a collaboration between curriculum and ed services.
Okay.
Yeah. And then obviously, as we always do, tons of professional development for staff, right? We need to make sure that our staff have the tools that they need to be successful to support our kids and their growth. So we did a lot of work, and I shared this with you this summer, around foundational reading and writing skills. We built a word study series of units for our third graders. We are doing standards aligned small group instruction support for all of our staff. We developed a protocol around using formative assessment data to create standards-based targeted instruction for teachers at the middle school level. We're working with our advancing literacy professional developers to support our teachers and our instructional coaches in the building so that we can continue to grow provide supports for teachers. in the building. We built patterns of power units. Those are all around conventions of language. Think to things that we maybe used to do, like around sort of grammar and syntax and things of that nature. Units for grades 3 through 8. So all of those grade levels, 3 through 8, will have units, 1 unit each marking period. Our curriculum teams built morphology units. Those are word study units, basically at the middle school level, really focused on sort of Latin roots of words. That's sort of the backbone of that work. So morphology units in grades 6 through 8 language arts, and also lots of professional development around these standards aligned pacing guides for foundational reading that look like, traditional literacy programs for our primary readers.
Question?
Sure.
How are we approaching the phonics issue? Is that part of?
Yeah, that is. So that professional development around pacing guides, our curriculum teams this summer built pacing guides for our primary grades K1 and 2 that include phonics, phonemic awareness, all of the things that are the components of a strong foundational reading program. We provided training to the teachers at the start of the school year, and we will be providing intermittent training throughout the course of the year to support the teachers on the rollout of these new units and making sure that teachers have the tools that they need to successfully teach them for students.
And that it goes along with the other grades as well? Or is it just K through 2?
Well, the foundational reading standards are only in K through 2.
So you're not teaching phonics in the other classes?
It's not part of the standards. We're teaching a word study program in 3rd grade because that aligns with the 3rd grade standards. But phonics specifically is a standard for the primary grades, K through 2.
Because that was found to be not effective, the word study. They found that the phonics was much more effective.
Word study is phonics in 3rd grade. It's the next progression or the development of phonics in 3rd graders for kids who are readers.
Okay, it's not word recognition, all right.
No.
Okay. That's one thing.
Okay, moving on to mathematics. So this is our summary report for our 3rd through 8th grade students in mathematics. 56% of our students in grades 3 through 8 are meeting or exceeding standards in math, which leaves 44% of our students partially proficient or not proficient. Just as a reminder, and I highlight this every year, remember that our 8th grade numbers look a little skewed because the algebra is that pull out of all of the 8th graders that take algebra. So notice the number of students in 8th grade that take 8th grade math versus the number of students that take algebra and their performance across the proficiency levels. We have a much higher number of students at the algebra level that are meeting expectations. Sure.
Is there any, I don't know where it is in the timeline, but is there any thought about that 8th grade math program and the curriculum that accompanies it in terms of revising it or?
Well, so I will share with you, which really has nothing to do with the presentation this evening, but just 2 weeks ago, the State Board of Education adopted new standards in English language arts and math, K through 12. So I anticipate that my curriculum teams and I will be doing work around making sure that our curriculum documents and any resources that we have are aligned with the new standards expectations. Yeah. This is that visual, again, that graphic of the data from the previous. Again, I think it's important to note that our students in Freehold Township are far exceeding performance of students across the state, right? So if you look at these bars across the top, these green and dark green bars, these are our kids who are proficient, and they are much taller than the bars of the students in those grades across the state. The not proficient level at the state, we have 44% of our students not proficient. The level at the state is over 60%, 64%. This is our math subgroup data by race. Based on this data, about 27% of our Black students and 40% of our Hispanic students are meeting proficiency standards in mathematics. Sure, sure.
I know just from reading that performance, especially by subgroup, is somewhat influenced by, your classroom environment. Do you see people like you as a math teacher or
Reflected in the curriculum.
yeah,
Yes, absolutely.
where are we? I know, Neil, at one point, we got extra time or was it a DEI plan or something like where are we on our like inclusive practices, et cetera, as a district?
So I can tell you we've done a lot of work in that area from the lens of curriculum, right? Like we've been building resources and tools into the curriculum to have teachers have access to that, and especially in the area of language arts, recognizing that kids need to see themselves and their life experiences reflected in the books that they read and the texts that they have access to. I can let Neil speak to other things if that. Does that answer your question, or do you have a?
Well, that answers for ELA, but I'm just talking like district wide. Like I know staffing is always an issue. Like, is there what do you think in terms of these numbers and in terms of what we can be doing better as a district or what we already are doing as a district? Because I'm sure that you guys are already all over this.
I think the first step, which has already been done, was the curriculum department work in ensuring that the curriculum documents and the materials that we use reflect inclusivity, and that work has been completed.
Correct.
It's finished. Next, we're working on the data from our bullying reports, trying to implement at the middle schools currently restorative practices. Looking also at developing a scope and sequence of social and emotional learning curriculum, starting in kindergarten through 8th grade, and our middle schools still continue with Wellness Wednesdays and advisories, because a good component of that is building relationships among students within the school. And that's the work that we're doing now.
I have a follow-up question. What are we doing, or are we doing anything to attract teachers and staff who also represent some of these?
Yes, we
I know
have.
it's hard right now. Finding
We
Yeah, anybody.
Yeah.
We'll take anybody.
Certified teachers is difficult, right.
we've always put out our postings to organizations that search for a more diverse teaching staff. We don't get a lot of applicants that are reflective of diverse backgrounds.
Okay, this is our math data by gender. 53% of our female students are proficient in math as compared to 59% of our male students.
I'm sorry, one thing I should share though is our teaching staff, while it's not extremely diverse, is more diverse than you would think, because the ethnicities and backgrounds of teaching staff may not be apparent. But we do know that we have a good representation, maybe not of every subgroup, but we do have a fairly well representation of some subgroups within our teaching staff. Did want to mention that.
This is our math subgroup by program data. Again, these are our students who are socioeconomically disadvantaged, receiving 504 or special education services or English language services. 22% of our students identified with special education needs were proficient in math, and 18% of our English language learners were proficient in math. Excuse me?
Were, 22% were, are.
During last year's
I'm
test
saying were
assessment.
not.
Yes, right.
So 22, so that.
We're proficient. 22% proficient rate. I can share these slides with the board so you don't have to frantically write notes. I'm happy to do that. This is our longitudinal data looking at our students in mathematics. Again, I'm going to track a cohort for you with the black arrows so that you can see how a group of students did pre and post pandemic. So these kiddos who were third graders in 2016-17 were 64% proficient in math. When they went to fourth grade, they were 59% proficient in math. And then when they went to fifth grade, they were 60% proficient in math. Then we had the pandemic. And then as eighth graders, now remember we have grade 8 math and we have grade 8 algebra. 12% proficient in the grade 8 math, but 88% proficient in algebra. So when you look at those groups of students combined, our kids post-pandemic have demonstrated growth, right? Again, like language arts, we don't necessarily see that across every cohort, but more often than not, we are seeing growth. And again, I want to look at a post-pandemic group. So these are our fourth graders post-pandemic. They were 54% proficient as fourth graders and then became 63% proficient as fifth graders. That's really significant growth post-pandemic, right? So again, while the bars aren't necessarily as high as we would like them to be, we are seeing marked growth from our kids from year to year. Yeah, it is.
Can I ask a question?
Certainly.
How much do you feel that, we did a lot of, I know we put in a rent for more tutoring and stuff going forward, but last year we did a lot in our middle schools. Elementary and middle, but,
Those task teams?
yes, thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. So, I mean, we were just talking about it yesterday. The principals in the buildings really felt very strongly that that time was really meaningful for kids, right? Teachers were able to identify particular students who needed supports in particular areas and were able to keep them and pull them for a period of time, long or short, like 3 weeks, 4 weeks, maybe 6 or 8 weeks, depending on what a student
Graduated
needed.
them when they needed
Correct.
to, pull them back in when they had to.
Correct.
Now, is that something we're looking to replicate with the going forward with the intensive tutoring, or is that just be,
So thank you very much, Michael. The high intensity tutoring grant, as I have written it, will be using a third party vendor to do virtual tutoring. We found that model really successful in terms of being able to be flexible with parents.
Okay.
We are going to again, I'm saying all of this in the hopes that we get the grant. We're going to offer it at home if families want to do it at home, or on site at school before or after school, depending on school hours. Again, in an effort to scoop in as many kids as possible in a forum that will be most conducive, right? Some families have after school activities, their kids can't stay after school, but they might be available at 6 o'clock in the evening. Other families are going to want their kids to stay right after school and do it because they're so busy they have other things going on.
We did also discuss this morning,
yes.
as I'm working on finalizing the amendment to the ARP grant, that there are funds left over. I haven't shared with the administrators yet because I don't have the number of hours per school that we are in a position to be able to offer some level of that
More of
task
that
team
task
again.
team as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
And again, if it's just gonna go based on, I know like last year, for instance, they used scores to say, okay, this is the level, if you're close to this, we're gonna pull you in.
Yeah.
Because that was a big jump.
It was.
Yeah.
It was.
54 to 63, I mean, considering everything, I think it's a huge jump.
And I think it's, I mean, I think it's something that our staff and our administrators should be awfully proud of. They worked really hard. So again, I know that collectively we would all like to see our kids at levels of proficiency in the 70s and 80s, but we are far outperforming the state average, and our kids and we are moving in the right direction. Yep.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Do we have any data to compare the other districts in the regional?
Not that I can share publicly.
I have looked at some of it. And I will tell you, we're kind of keeping pace with where we've been historically. I prepare that spreadsheet. We're kind of in the middle of the pack. The districts that are wealthier than us do better. The districts that are not as wealthy are doing worse.
Which is consistent with what one would expect based on DFG, those former DFG ratings. Next steps in math. Again, similar to language arts, we are implementing this new model for intervention, and again, making sure that we review and revise our curriculum based on looking at our kids' performance on NJSLA specific to those evidence statements. We built standards aligned common assessments for our middle school math classes. Students will be taking those assessments throughout the course of this school year, and teams of teachers will be doing data analysis at department meetings to take a look at how our kids are doing. in relation to those standards assessments, right? So taking a look at how, from a predictive standpoint, how our kids are going to do when they get to NJSLA, and also giving them practice around test questions that look like or model NJSLA. We will have a district math goal, one for grades 3 through 5 and another through grades 6 through 8, focusing on math. Like I shared with you around language arts, we have built those resource toolkits for teachers so that our middle school special education teachers have resources to help them provide standards-based instruction and give those students more access or rigorous access to the general education standards, obviously in a way that is accessible for their kids. And then at the elementary school level, our standards aligned bridges assessments. Students are taking those on paper. Teachers are entering that data into Linkit so that we can do some more data analysis in the Linkit platform to tell us what standards our kids are doing well on and what standards we may need to, build some resources for teachers instructionally around.
Can I ask a question? How granular is that data? Like, can you get to like a specific
Item analysis. I can do, yeah. That's why we're putting it into Linkit, because we can do that. So it is, and it's a great tool.
I
Yeah.
know we discussed about, correct me if I'm wrong, Linkit being, we're gonna have some type of parent portal for
It's
Linkit.
coming. My letter hopefully should go out this week.
Very excited.
Clearly not as excited as I am.
But, okay, fine, you beat me there. But my question is, how, like, for instance, is it gonna just show our scores like we currently get out of Genesis? Or is it gonna be able to drill down to a little bit more detailed data?
So you'll be able to see your child's score, performance level, and the range in which it falls.
Okay.
So, and the ranges in MAP are similar to NJSLA. So
Okay.
not meeting expectations, partially meeting, approaching, meeting expectations, and exceeding. So you'll get your child's score within those bands. You'll also get what that looks like from a percentile perspective. And then remember, MAP is reported by RIT score.
Yep.
So the RIT score will be in the bands, you'll get the percentile, and then also in language arts, you'll get your child's reading Lexile level.
Okay.
Science. I know last year we did a lot of wringing of our hands around our science data because it did not look good. Again, still outperforming the state. I am really excited to share with you tonight that our students in grades 5 through 8 demonstrated 10% growth in their proficiency in science. So last year we had 19% proficiency in science. This year I'm reporting 29%.
Is that 5 through 8 or just 5 and 8?
5 and 8. So those tests are cumulative. Fifth grade students take a science test that reflects science standards for grades 3, 4, and 5. 8th grade students take a science test that reflects standards for 6, 7, and 8. This is, again, that visual and compares our performance to the state level. Again, while 29% proficiency doesn't sound like something to brag about, we are far outperforming the state. And again, science data, this is by race. Because this is a much smaller population of students, only our 5th graders and our 8th graders, there is more suppressed data here. There are fewer students in these racial categories at each of those grade levels. So there are several categories where there is not data because it would be personally identified. This is by gender. Our male students are ever so slightly outperforming our female students. And this is by program. Again, our English language learners, our economically disadvantaged students. Again, more of this data is suppressed because of the small numbers of students that take the test. Next steps in science. Based on our performance last year on NJSLA, we kicked into high gear and did a whole lot of supports and revisions. We purchased mystery science resources and provided professional development, or will be over the course of this year, providing professional development to all of our teachers at grades K through 5 to implement those mystery science resources. At the middle school level, our science teachers will be building standards aligned assessments similar to the ones that our language arts and our math teachers are implementing and doing data analysis. Our science teachers are going to be collaborating in their department meetings to build those standards aligned assessments, and field test them with their kids and do some data analysis. We've also built curricular resources for our middle school science that focuses really on the science and engineering practices and those cross-cutting concepts. So less about sort of the memorizing of facts and more about studying science through the concepts of phenomena, because those are the kinds of questions that students will have to tackle on the test.
No, that's okay. I'm just back there. Eleanor, do you have any questions?
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Becky.
Thank you.
Okay, you just answered my question. So yes, yes, yes.
Sorry, I do that every time I get them on.
Okay. It's really warm back there. I'm afraid, but if we put the air on, then people in the back will not be able to hear.
It's heat, it's not air.
What?
It's heat, not air.
Oh, it's heat coming out anyway. Okay. Okay. We'll just leave all the windows open then, I guess.
It's in its set point. Come on.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not on its body.
Okay.
Yeah, you'll raise the room to like 3 degrees.
Okay. All right. So before we move on to public participation, I'm going to move back to President's remarks. Those of you that were present at the last meeting heard debate by this board whether policy 5756 should be abolished by this board. It is the policy of Freehold Township to make these decisions only after getting community input. We were hoping to have a roundtable, and the timing for scheduling the roundtable did not line up prior to this board meeting. So in lieu of the roundtable then, there will be a roundtable. It be November 2nd, I believe. So prior to having this meeting, a survey went out to the public. I have 2 takeaways that I just want to share first, and I will allow all the board members to have input prior to that. Much of the comments coming from the last meeting were centered on this perception that if the policy were abolished, that there would be no protections in place for discrimination in this district at all. And that certainly was not true. So part of the survey was to send out to the public all the existing policies so that people could read them themselves and decide for themselves whether the existing policies that we have in place, in addition to the already existing statutes and laws in the state of New Jersey, were sufficient. I think the takeaway, and I'm going to allow Ms. Venditoli, who has the survey results, to give all the survey results. However, I will say I think that there was also some misunderstanding surrounding the survey. So I don't think it's fair to the public to do this after public participation. I don't think it's fair to do it in new business or old business. So prior to moving on to public participation, I want to have our board discussion with our survey results and platform off our last meeting. Also tonight, we have present Mr. Michael Gross, who is our board attorney. There were comments made at the last meeting and even after the last meeting about people's perceptions about the law, the current law, or things that we're trying to do that also were not true. There's a lot of misinformation. So I don't want to misspeak, and I also don't want any member of the public here to not get the right information. So we have our board attorney available to answer questions as well. I was asked of me whether we were going to put a resolution on tonight's agenda. I don't anticipate putting any resolution on any agenda. I know other towns did that, and I understand why, because the resolution put forth why they were doing what they did. I don't think we need that, because I think it's very clear we are going through a process, and we are going to continue to go through our process in the way Freehold Township does it, and that's with community input and discussing it in public at our board meetings. So I tried to reach out to some people prior to sending out the survey to get some input. After our last meeting, I had not heard back from anybody. So because we couldn't have a round table, the survey seems like the next best choice to get some of the information out there. With that, I'm going to ask Kerry to give the results of the survey unless you want to speak first beforehand, and then we'll have board discussion.
I'm also just going to give a brief summary of what the survey asked, so that for people that may be here. No. Okay. Oh. You can hear over. That's not what you made it, right?
Do you want to take my?
You want to see Carrie?
I'll just shut that one.
Can you help with that? Thank you, gentlemen.
No, thank you.
Is this any better? Oh, wait, can you hear me? Sorry, not. Better? Jeez. Nobody wants to hear me that loud. So the community relations survey, it said, prior to completing the survey, we ask that you review policy 5756, transgender students, in addition to the following current Freehold Township Board of Education policies. And then we listed policy 5750, the equal educational opportunity, policy 5755, the equity in educational programs and services, policy 1550, equal employment anti-discrimination practices, policy 2660, affirmative action program for school and classroom practices, policy 1140, affirmative action program, policy 2411, guidance counseling, policy 5600, student discipline code of conduct, policy 5512, harassment, intimidation, or bullying, and policy 8465, hate crimes and bias-related acts. The first question asked you to identify your role in the district if you were a staff member, a parent of a student in the pre-K through 8 school district, or a Freehold Township community member, meaning not a parent of a current student. The responses to that were, we had 367 people respond. 16.1% were Freehold Township community members. 77.4% were Freehold Township school staff members. I'm sorry, Freehold Township parents. And then we had about a little less than 15% were our staff. The next question said, after reviewing all of the policies referenced above, which I just read, after reviewing all the policies referenced above listed them again, sufficiently cover the contents of policy 5756, transgender students, you're asked to agree, disagree, or say you're undecided. Give me 1 second, I want the actual numbers. Do you have this pulled up by any chance?
Pull it up real fast.
Okay, thank you. It's hard to do both on the same.
Just takes a minute.
Yeah, sorry.
That's okay.
I apologize that we don't have this on a slide. The survey only closed on Sunday because we wanted to give people as much time as possible to get on and complete it. And the results were only compiled yesterday and actually emailed to the board late yesterday.
The last slide.
So it has to be an oral presentation, sorry.
Sorry. Yep, that one. Thank you.
Sure.
I'm getting old. Wait, that's not gonna help me.
What are you trying to do?
Sorry. Yeah, the numbers, but that's not showing up.
In the interim, while Carrie's looking for the numbers, I do want to address
1 second.
one area of concern. I had several residents question why Freehold Township staff members were allowed to participate in the survey if they did not live in Freehold Township. So I don't know if you want to address, have Mr. Dickstein address that.
Freehold Township staff members are a member of the school community at large. So it was important to collect the feedback from not only the residents who live in the town, also, which include parents, but also it was important to get the feedback of the staff as members of the larger school community. We do believe here that it's a team effort and our staff members are with our children their entire school day. So we thought it was important to invite staff members who did feel comfortable and had an opinion to provide it.
Sorry, okay. So after reviewing all of the policies referenced above, after reviewing all the policies referenced above, that policy 5756 was sufficiently covered. There was 35.7% agreed, 45.4% disagreed, 18.9% were undecided. And then the last survey question was, do you believe school staff should notify parents when the student discloses identity as transgender? Yes, no, undecided. Another 367 responses. It was 76.3% said yes, 20.2% said no, and oh, sorry. I'll do it again. Do you believe school staff should notify parents when the student discloses identity as transgender? There was 367 responses. 76.3% said yes, 20.2% said no, and the rest were undecided.
Can you repeat the first one? So people...
Sure. The after reviewing all the policies referenced above, policies were listed. Do they sufficiently cover the contents of policy 5756? 45.4% said they disagreed, 18.9% said they were undecided, and 35.7% said they agree. And then the final question was if they wanted to leave other comments.
I looked at the Monmouth University poll was taken back in August of this year. And the results were very in line with what our community responded. They felt 81% of parents in New Jersey, in Monmouth County, Jersey, felt that parents should be notified of any gender identity questions. So, and 77% in New Jersey in general felt that no parents should be notified of this issue. So I think our survey was similar. Thank you.
Well, and to be clear, the policy as it exists just says parental notification is not required. Abolishing the policy does not require parental notification or not require parental notification. Abolishing the policy leaves the best practices in the hands of the school district on a case-by-case basis, which is what this district has been doing already. So I don't know if that came across clear in the survey or not. Some of the other comments that came through were the bathroom locker room issue, I would call it. People were confused as to whether we were passing a policy allowing a student or an individual to use the bathroom or locker room for the gender that they identify with. Understand that that is already in place. That is not a policy we're looking to abolish. That's covered by the New Jersey law against discrimination. So that was not a topic of discussion and part of this policy. So I just want to be clear on that as well. This board is not deciding to implement a policy either requiring or abolishing parental notification. It's deciding whether 5756 is not necessary because it is either ambiguous or already covered under other existing policies. If you feel it is not, I would appreciate anybody saying where you feel it falls short.
Ask you a follow-up on that, just a point of clarification. So the current policy says that there is no affirmative duty for the school district to notify a parent. And from what you just said, I think what you're saying is that would in essence be in place, even if we got rid of the policy, because there would still be no affirmative duty for the school district to notify a parent.
Yes.
Yep.
I just wanted to clarify. I just want to know that. I just want to clarify, because again, there were a lot of based on the comments, there were a lot of misunderstandings, and I just want us to be clear what we're really voting on. Do we know who actually opened the policies? Like, can we tell? I know sometimes we can tell, but we can't tell if people, so it's just basically on your honor that you say you read them.
I could tell you like the timestamp. Probably the first 50 people definitely didn't, because the amount of time it would take to read all those policies.
The first 50 people, responded within 20 minutes of the survey going out. There's no way to read all those policies in 20 minutes. I mean, we don't have click data or anything on that, but just looking at when it was submitted.
Mm-hmm.
It was also shared at we had our PTO liaison meeting, and the PTO, some of the members, the executive board members, explicitly stated that they know them as well as others didn't read the policies, which is why I think that first question, based on the comments, I don't think the first question was accurate, had an accurate response. I think it's a little skewed, because if you didn't read those policies, some people misunderstood that we were considering adoption of those policies. Those exist, and they're mandated policies. So I think there was some confusion in the responses. And as far as parental notification, we have had the practice. I have supervised guidance for 10 years prior to being in this position. And I've been in this position now for like 5 or 6 years. And our work has always been that our goal, when a child comes to us with any issue, is to work with that child to inform the parents. So that's not something, when the transgender policy came out, that changed our practice of always trying to work with children to collaboratively tell their parents. We don't disbelieve that parents are not a critical role in not only their child's education, but in raising their children. So that is something that prior to the implementation of that policy was a practice that we had, and since it's been implemented, once, if the board chooses to consider abolishing that policy, our practice of, and when we say case by case, we clearly will not disclose, nor do I think any member of the public would disagree, that if a child, we knew that there was a history of abuse or neglect in the household, that would be a case where we would likely work with that child to determine if and when it was appropriate and not putting a child in harm. If we had documented history, different than if the child thought their parent would not accept it. There's a difference between those two things, and I want to be clear with that. If there were a history of abuse or neglect in a household, we would have a very difficult time working with a child to tell their parents when we have that documented history. That is different. That is distinct and different than a child who says, my parents will not agree.
I think we also, my reading of the policy, when I read 5756, and I've read it many times, that is consistent with it. It does say that, if a child is reluctant to share this information with mom and dad, the principal, superintendent is supposed to sit that child down and explain that if you are changing your pronouns at school, if you are giving yourself a new name. Chances are your parents may find out through your classmates telling their parents, etc. So it does provide resources or require the school to provide resources to facilitate that conversation. And based on what you said at the meeting prior, that indicates to me that's what the district has been doing.
Prior to the policy implementation, and if it were abolished, we do the same. But it's a step beyond that. It's not just telling them your parents may find out. It's working with them to come up with a plan to tell their parents.
And that's what we
support
Yes.
to do that.
and that's what we've been doing, correct? And so that will not change.
That will not change, no.
So I guess what I'm trying to figure out is what will change, right? Because if we're going to vote on something, we have to vote on what we are changing. Like, we have to know what the implications of that change are. So that's what I'm struggling with. I've read all of these policies. I went through them. Clearly, 57, 56 has a lot more in it than any of these policies cover. And I can go through specifically what I'm concerned about, like what I want to know, if we're getting rid of this, are we going to continue to do these things? So can we do that? All right. It had to be very tiny to fit on this paper. Bear with me. Hold on. It says, schools should ensure a supportive, non-discriminatory environment for transgender students.
We do that for all students regardless, and that's part of the reason of looking. It's right, it's the law, and it's also when you look at those other policies, the difference is that those policies talk about protected classes and groups, one of which would be transgender. This policy specifically speaks only to transgender. So that expectation would be for any one of our students, a safe and supportive environment.
And I do see that two policies do deal with that. Policy 1140 and policy 5750 speak directly to that. School districts shall accept a student's asserted gender identity. Parental consent is not required. How would we handle that going forward?
I'd have to, because we have first and second reading in between, I would have to make sure what the law against discrimination says and if that is a requirement of that law.
Okay.
I don't know it well enough. I said I am not familiar verbatim with the law against discrimination to know. I'd have to check that that's not included somewhere in a law that we're required to follow regardless of policy.
Okay, that's fair. Boards, we discussed the no affirmative duty to notify a parent, which you said would not change. If parents disagree with chosen pronoun, we already did that one. Principal, what?
Name change or.
Yeah, I answered that.
Yeah, we discussed that. Principal or designee should have an open but confidential discussion with students to ascertain a student's preference in chosen name, chosen pronoun use, and parental communications. Would that still occur?
I think that goes along with the first one still, because it's assuming that there's no parental involvement. So I think that goes along with what I would have to determine from the first question, if it exists somewhere else outside of our policy in law.
Okay. Dress permitted according to gender identity.
We don't, even outside of that, we have a dress code, and if you're abiding by the dress code, then you're within you're following our policy.
So we wouldn't have a separate one.
Yep.
And bullying is covered under the bullying statute. Superintendent must ensure training of school staff on sensitivity and respect toward transgendered students.
We do training throughout the year on all students, regardless of how they identify. It can be transgender, it could be protected classes. We do harassment, intimidation, and bullying required training annually. We work with our students through, we work with our students through social emotional learning in order to It's for all. It's not specific, which is part of what the superfluous components of this policy is that we do that already with all classes of students.
But like transgendered, and I will confess my own ignorance here. There's a lot of new terminology. There's a lot of new, pronoun use, etc. that certainly I am not familiar with. I don't know that our teachers would be unless it was specifically addressed.
No, we do not teach specific terminology regarding transgender specifically. It's more broad of respect for all students, regardless of how they identify, their race, ethnicity, gender, all components that make somebody an individual, not specifically only transgender as it is in this policy. So transgender is included, but we also don't educate them on all the different terminology that goes along with
It probably,
transgender.
understand, because we asked how many students we have that this policy would even affect.
The question was, are you asking?
You can answer that. I said I think that reasoning is we develop staff training many times based on need. And I don't think we have had the need because we're a K through 8 district. So I don't want to misspeak. You could get the numbers.
So in the last 2 years, the number of students who have come to their counselor or trusted adult to assert gender identity issues, it was 0 in the elementary school and 5 between both middle schools. And we have, you have the enrollment, 3,600 students.
But if we felt that staff training was necessary.
Well, our staff training, what we do, none of our staff training connected to sensitivity or working with, it's more general and broad diversity and not a specific class of students.
What?
Cultural competence, being sensitive to needs, not a specific class of students.
Okay, so go ahead, Mary.
But abolishing 5756 may call for more specific training on transgender issues. That's, I think.
I don't think it would.
Okay.
That's my opinion. I don't think it would.
All right.
Again, these are just things that are included in the current policy that I want us to be clear on. If we're getting rid of, then we're getting rid of them. Equal access to educational programs and activities, even in circumstances in which other students, parents, or community members raise objections. I think this deals with the sport issue, the locker room issue, etc.
Well, the locker room issue, the locker rooms, the bathrooms are already covered under the law. And sports. No, go ahead. Do you want to?
And that's not specific to schools. That the law against discrimination regarding the access
That's everything.
to bathrooms are public accommodations, and a school is a public accommodation. It's not specific to schools. It's in society under the law of discrimination. Being a public facility, we are bound to that law regardless of this policy. That policy doesn't create that ability. It's the law of against discrimination that
the specific, I don't have it in front of me. Michael, do you know it off the top of your head? Is it 10.5F? Anybody? The statute. Is it?
Are you talking about the LAD?
Yeah.
Yeah, I have that.
Is it 10.5F for any member of the public who wants to read it themselves regarding public accommodation? It's regarding, and what was the other I was about to say? You can't interrupt me. I'm old. I forgot.
The other thing was sports.
So the governing sports in New Jersey, I always say it wrong, the NJ, SIAI, their own policy is that a student is permitted to play the sport for the gender they identify with.
Okay.
That is their policy, and that is the governing body for the sports here.
So just
10.5-12.
10.5.
So just
11F. I knew there was an F in there somewhere.
just to be clear and put it in the simplest terms so that everybody understands, whether we repeal this policy or whether we don't repeal this policy, a child who identifies as transgender can use the bathroom that they choose.
under the law against discrimination. So that's under the law against discrimination. not policy. It's the law against discrimination that a public facility, a public restroom, needs to be accessible to students based upon, or individuals, not specific to students, based upon their asserted gender identity if they choose. It's their choice. They don't have to. And next question about the sport, that is our governing body, as Mrs. Lambert explained, NJSIAA, and we subscribe to the NJSIAA rules. If those changed, then that would change as well. So it's not the board policy, it's the governing body for interscholastic athletics.
What I'm trying to get at is that the board does not decide these things. These are decided at the state level, and we don't, as a body, we don't have control over how that affects any public building,
Those two
including
things.
our public.
One is legislated, the law against that discrimination.
And
The
the
other
other
one is by a
is board.
governing body, NJSIAA.
Okay.
In the case of, how are we going to deal with the confidentiality plan regarding the student's transgendered or transitioning status? Not even just dealing with parents, but in terms of, like, how does the school district, say we're presented with a child who's 7, who's transgendered already, presents in school as a boy, are we going to keep that confidentiality status in place?
Yeah.
Confidentiality with whom?
With respect to the community, with respect to records, with respect to anything on Genesis,
I
etc.
believe the law, again, law governs what is reflected in the records as far as the name and those type of official records. I believe the law establishes how we have to go forward. We have not dealt with yet 7-year-olds who are coming forward asserting gender identity, but while it might not be as formal as what you're speaking about with a confidentiality plan, we're working together with them to provide that emotional support that goes along with somebody struggling with anything, in this case gender identity, as it would for anything else that a child comes forward with. But it's not, we don't go, the child typically works with us to determine what they want and where.
I just want to
Do you
be
want to
clear.
chime in on the
No, just also, it's
confidentiality?
also covered by FERPA.
Yes, that's what I was.
Okay.
Thank you.
And how would we handle school records just across the board? Like, as far as this policy says that you will, have the student's reflected name, gender, everything on school records.
I believe that's what we're required to do under law. Not our, the policy is
different law.
restating it. The law tells us we have to do it that way.
Okay, I just want to be really clear. And
Same would be true through reporting to you through NJ Smart too, right? The same would hold true for reporting through NJ Smart.
We'd be following whatever the law guides us to do.
Okay.
Because it is stated in the law.
I just want to be really clear about if we're getting rid of the policy, we need to be really clear as a district what the law says and how we're going to handle it.
I don't believe it would change our practice because our practice is aligned with the law regardless of the policy. But we still, between the first and second reading, will work with our board attorney to make sure that that we are doing what the law requires.
There's another section in the policy that is regarding activities. So not sports, like, through the governing body that
We don't have any.
sorry. Through the sports authority that we were talking about before, I can't remember, the IA.
JSIAA.
Thank you. This is talking about activities with respect to gender segregated athletic activities, intramural, interscholastic athletics. All students must be allowed to participate in a manner consistent with their gender identity.
Outside of sports, we don't have any gender-specific programs, including intramurals or activities.
So it's not applicable.
No.
Okay.
And then the other thing I see here is support the formation of clubs and programs related to LGBTQ youth and transgendered youth. Will we continue to have a diversity club? Will we continue to support that?
So that it's important to understand that I believe both the clubs in each middle school the diversity club, so they're broader than what's in that policy. They're broad and generic diversity, and those are funded by the PTOs. So if the PTOs continue to donate money for those purposes, then those organizations, it's an annual decision.
But if kids wanted to meet and make an LGBTQ club, would we?
You know, the way that any organization has to be initiated by a staff member because there's funds that go along with it as far as payment.
But the policy right now says that we have to support such efforts. Would we now have?
We do. We have the diversity club in both schools.
But, you know, that's where there's ambiguity in the policy. What does it mean to support it? Just not deny it? Or does support it mean fund it?
Mm-hmm.
I could argue that both ways. And that's my issue with the policy. I think there's a lot that leaves the school district out to dry, so to speak. And if you can be on the losing end of that time and time again by making the wrong decision.
I worry that getting rid of the policy leaves us with nothing. Or at least if we don't have a clear definition of what the law says and how our operational plan is, then we're kind of leaving ourselves vulnerable as well.
If we operate within the legal guidelines, within FERPA, within LAD, and we do what we are required to do under the law, we are not here to legislate. We're not the legislature. So if there's a lack of clarity across multiple school districts in the state, then the legislature needs to get back to work and figure that out. But and I don't believe a school district should be put in the position, personally. This is I'm just speaking personally, not on behalf of the board, of having to figure all this out and make these decisions that could open a district up to any lawsuit in either direction. Because let's face it, who pays for a lawsuit? We taxpayers do. And it's not fair to them. And I think so I'd rather have no ambiguity and hope to do the right thing. You don't want to be in violation of your own policy here or there inadvertently.
True, but the policy was developed, if I understand the history of it, and I know this goes back before me, this was 8 years ago that this, the legislation was initially passed. The legislation directed, because there was such confusion in this area, the legislation directed the Department of Education to provide guidance to districts, which then was taken to result in this policy creation.
Well, and I think part of the problem is if you read the initial legislation that was signed by Chris Christie in 2017, the legislation specifically states that they direct the Department of Education to issue guidance to help schools do what is required by listing most of the things. Right. Nowhere does it say in that legislation anything about parental consent. It's not in there. So when the guidance came out and said no parental consent is required, that's what sparked this whole debate. And this whole debate has become polarizing to communities. And if you look at most school districts, as Mr. Dickstein said, there's 7 other policies, and they've been doing what they do all along. Just like no one transgender person is like any other transgender person, no gay person is like any other. People come out in different ways, different forms at different times. Everybody's journey is unique, and the school district, at least here, has treated each person as unique and dealt with it accordingly. My concern is I have faith in this administration to do it the way they have been doing it. But when they're no longer here, like I said at the last meeting you weren't here, we can all assume at one point we can get hit by the bus and you have a different administration. Right, or higher. You have a different administration in place who reads those words, parental consent is not required, and chooses to read that as, I never have to give parental consent. Now you're on the opposite side of that, and you open a district up to a lawsuit. But they can do that with their words. No, Well, no, I know they're not the words, but that is how some people are interpreting them, and which is why I think this policy has become such a polarizing force. But I think we should all still discuss it because I like going line by line. Just there are concerns.
I do think it's important because I don't recognize everybody here, but I've been in this district for 20 years, 27 in education. I've been a principal in the district, assistant superintendent, and for any parent that knows me, any staff member that knows me, they know my commitment is to the safety, security, and well-being of every single child in my care. They're all in my care. And I will steal this from Mr. Severo. For those who have been here, they are, I'm sorry, you share your children with me. They're my children when they're here. And they are, my goal will always be, regardless of any other characteristic of any single child, they are a student of Freehold Township. Thereby, my responsibility and my commitment will never change to the safety and well-being. And I can assure you, I see some of our staff here, they are on the same page as me. They're there in our care. We will support them. We will do what we believe is best for every single child in our care every single day.
And Michelle, I'm going to go back to what Mary said before about the formation of the clubs, programs, and so forth. If it's not, say something were to happen at a school, right? They want to form a club, it was denied. The final recourse would be to come to the board anyway on an appeal, right? Like that would be the chain. So it's wouldn't just not happen, or
Violation, I think, of state law to deny anybody a club. That
Contract.
It's the difficult part. The difficult part is the funding that goes along with it.
Yeah.
There's a stipend for a staff member to advise that comes, and as you're familiar, our contract or with the Teachers Association lists specific sports and honoraria for which they're remunerated. Separate from that, because years ago when we couldn't afford to support financially all of the ones that were out there, PTOs agreed, staff members, it depends how each school is different, but a lot of times our administrators or our staff say these are these are what we're asking for this year as far as honoraria go, and then the PTO agrees, the board approves them. So that would be the challenge, is the remuneration that goes along with somebody working with a group of children.
Can you talk to me a little bit, if I am a transgendered student and I am dressing as the opposite sex at school and asking my friends to call me by a different name, but I don't approach a staff person, do you still try to make the call home?
I'd have to consider that. We haven't had that yet. The students typically seek out support from a trusted adult to say this is, because it's not something that's easy.
parents see them leave the house.
Right. It's not something that we've experienced. It's not something we've experienced. Each child has come forward in these cases to ask for the support. And when I say the support, I want to be clear, it's the mental health support in their adapting to whatever they're experiencing with their gender identity. We don't go further than that and counsel them on the medical care, counsel them on where to go next. We counsel them on while they're in school, their mental health and well-being as they're struggling or not struggling, potentially with, in this case, gender identity, but in anything that they're doing.
Neil, I have a question. To your point, when you said you would have to see how to handle something like that. Now, granted, we don't know the exact numbers or if that could ever even happen, but if it does, absent of a policy, wouldn't we have to have something in place, a guideline or a policy to say that if this is to happen, we are going to notify the parents or we're not going to notify the parents?
No, this policy doesn't say that. So that doesn't, and again, it's hard. Certain hypotheticals I can respond to, that's not one, because we haven't experienced it. Again, over the years, there have been the few students who assert gender identity and come to a trusted adult for support. In the past 2 years, the number is 5, and in those cases, the student has come to a trusted adult for that support, or at least just to notify. So I can't. That's too ambiguous of a question for me to say I know exactly what I would do.
Yeah, I have a question as a follow-up to that medical issue. You said that the child is supported mentally, emotionally, but isn't that a professional level? That should be at a, shouldn't, transgenderism is a sexual dysphoria, similar that should be supported by doctors and medical professionals.
So
Same way we would treat insulin deficiency or a broken leg or an arm.
the job of the school counselor. So you're talking about a medical condition, which our nurses would counsel students on and refer them. So when we're dealing with transgender specifically, the role of the school counselor is to help them with their social and emotional well-being as they're going through this, not to counsel them through a process. So, for example, a student may say, I'm thinking of dressing as the other, as the gender with which I identify. What should I be careful? Like, how can I do that and be safe with my peers? That's what I mean with support. We are not mental health professionals to go as far, nor medical doctors to talk about physical transition, so we don't discuss that. We are not medical professionals, and that might be to what you're referring, but our goal is to support the mental health and well-being of any child who comes forward with any issue. So we would work with them. Again, part of it is working with them to tell their parents, but also it is while you're within our care, what issues are you experiencing, and how can we support you with those issues?
Okay, I understand.
Okay.
I have a question. So we're going through this policy, and there's a couple of places where, you're not sure, you're going to check with the law. I'd love to hear what that says. But otherwise, it says you're saying that nothing's going to change. So, and these areas, Michelle, that you say are ambiguous, why can we not work on this policy and make it less ambiguous, but still preserve these protections for transgender students?
My personal opinion is that you are opening up this district to a lawsuit in either direction. So take the ambiguity, parental consent. I'm sure you have half this board who would be happy to say parental consent or parental notification should be required. You have the other half of this board who say it should never be required, depending upon which side you fall on. If you put in a policy, parental notification is never required, in my opinion, you've now violated the fundamental rights of parents to parent their children. If you put in that parental notification is always required, you can potentially put any student in harm's way. Mm-hmm. You're always going to balance the protection of the law with what's in the best interests of the students. Mm-hmm. In that world, less is more. The less you say, the better off you are, because once you say it, you become defined by it. So that's how I feel.
I think that's why the statute says no affirmative duty. It doesn't say you have to. It doesn't say you don't have to. It kind of gives you the freedom to decide, as we have on a case-by-case basis, how to handle it.
So you put a superintendent in place who directs his administrators. Anytime you have a transgender student go to a trusted adult, our policy says you're under no affirmative duty to tell the parents. So it's our district. We're not going to notify the parents because that's what our policy says. There's no affirmative duty, so we're just never going to do it. We don't have to.
Well, it says we don't have to. Correct. It does.
But so back then, if I were a parent, I'd be all over us.
That's what he's essentially going to do if the policy is done. There's no affirmative duty for him to.
Well,
Nope. We said that we are going to work with, continue as we did before and during this policy, to work with children in a communication plan to tell their parents in a supportive environment. And also, as far as taking away the protections, it doesn't. The only question I'm leaving with is, can a student change their name without parental consent? And I said I have to check with the law against discrimination. Other than that, that's the only question I'm leaving with that's unanswered, unless I'm missing something.
The other one was if the parent disagreed with the name change.
That's
That
that's
one.
this question.
Okay. So my question is, what you just said, we work with the child to create a communication plan and we support them. Why can't we say that that's what we're going to do so that the parents are clear what we're going to do, everybody's clear what we're going to do, and any future boards or superintendents or whatever, unless they change the policy, it will be clear exactly what we're going to do.
Because I'm not going to do that if a home has a history of abuse or neglect in it. So it's that's not the answer.
I have a question for you, Michael. It's being mandatory reporters. And if you want to answer this after this meeting, that's okay. Being mandatory.
Anticipate, I'm gonna say, I'm not gonna give legal advice.
Yeah, I know. I'm anticipating your answer, but I'm gonna put it out there to think about. Being mandatory reporters, if we did have a policy that said we would work with the student to notify the parent, but there's suspected abuse, would the district's obligation to the student supersede the policy? You can think about that. Okay, I'm just.
You know, my answer would be, I'm not gonna give legal
I
opinion
know.
in public session. I will certainly reserve it for executive session and answer your question.
Okay, fair.
Now, the other question was, would we develop a confidential, would we have a confidential discussion with students to ascertain their preference, chosen name, chosen pronoun? And obviously, it does tie to the first one because it deals with parental communication. And that's what you said you would check with the law on.
Well, everything leading up to that, yes, we'd have that conversation, but it would then be contingent upon what does the law say about doing it with or without parental consent. So we could have the conversation. Could it be implemented? It depends on the law.
And I think we also have to know with this population, and certainly I am not an expert here. I don't think any of us are. But with this population of students, it's not only a physical abuse or neglect situation that would necessarily trigger alarm on the student's part. Sometimes the student obviously did not go to their parent first. There are concerns with this population concerning homelessness, concerning a parent alienating them after they come out. There's a whole host of other issues than a pure is it even DIFUS anymore? It's probably not DIFUS anymore.
PNP.
Situation.
That's difficult to ascertain from a child. So I would have to say preliminarily, that it would have to be a documented case that we're aware of DCP&P with abuse or neglect in the home. I don't think we can use whether or not a parent would accept it as a guideline for notification.
So you would notify unless there was a documented case in the home.
We would develop a communication plan to work with the child to tell the parents together.
And if the child was vehemently opposed to that every step of the way, and insisting, no, I don't want to tell them, then what?
We would still develop a communication plan working together with the goal to notify the parent.
Okay.
Which is what.
I actually do have a question. We are not taking a vote to abolish tonight.
We said at the last meeting that after discussion, we would consider putting it on for a first reading, which would put a second reading on November 14th's meeting. That would be the final vote in November if we put it on for a first reading tonight. We would have a community roundtable prior to that. Probably have some public participation this evening.
So and again, it's obviously up to the board members, would think about tabling it once again till after the roundtable, because I think, again, there was some confusion with that survey, and I would like the community members to voice, I want to hear before we even have a first reading of this, if we're going to have a first reading of this policy, I would want to hear directly from the public in a roundtable setting prior to.
That would depend on
The mic.
how we go.
So,
I
Can't hear you.
which one? So,
Let's finish our discussion and then we'll discuss which direction we want to go in.
okay. Because
Yeah.
okay, so you don't need a motion to table just a second.
We don't have a motion on, so we have nothing to table.
Okay.
Right.
I was confused. If we were putting it on for first reading tonight, why wasn't it on the agenda for first reading?
We didn't discuss it. We didn't even have the survey results.
Okay, it's just a weird order for me, because usually we list the things for first reading.
And I thought that was presumptive, so I didn't put it on. And if after this discussion, we felt it should go on tonight for a first reading, people were in alignment with that. Reading the survey results, I felt that there was some ambiguity that needed to be discussed, and I felt we should discuss it as a board in public. Like I said, other towns put it on for a first reading, having had no community involvement. And I believe that's probably why they did a resolution, so that the public could see what the thought process was. I just thought, and I thought we all agreed, that the manner in which we're doing it in public and over the course of a couple of weeks, kind of vetting all our issues, was the better way to go. So. Carrie, you have any? Okay, any comments one way or the other?
Please.
My comments are that I realize it's not a clear-cut issue. I do appreciate what Neil said. I do trust Neil. I trust Diane. I trust Becky. I trust Bob. I trust our administrators in our buildings to do what is right by students, and even by our parents. We are a very inclusive district. We work to bring parents and families into our schools, and those of us that are in the schools, you've seen it last year and even more this year. Our family nights, our reading, we want parental involvement in our students. And I don't want parents to feel as though we are shutting them out, and I think clarifying everything tonight, that we do make a communication plan, and that is how we have done things and how things would be going forward. I think is very helpful for a lot of people. I do have faith in our administration, and I do feel that whether we vote to abolish or whether we vote to not abolish the policy, that the students will be protected and our parents will feel as though they are included in what we do. And then really ask me if we could take a break when we're done with this, because Megan and I are.
Can I just add a small, even though I'm not a member of the board? We're doing presentations this week for school violence awareness and for school safety week. And we meaning our juvenile detectives and I, and me, we're meeting with all of the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade students. And parents are receiving communication from the principals. So we were at Barkaway on Monday. There was a point to this. And then we were at Applegate Monday afternoon. We were at Eisenhower this morning. We were at Katsina this afternoon. We'll be at West Freehold in the morning, and then at Laura Donovan. And then on Thursday, we'll wrap up at Erickson. Seeing the number of children who responded to the, do you game at home? Do you have a phone? Do you have a device? Do you know these apps? And knowing that there are consequences, what we're advising in those communique to parents is everything that we said to the kids. Your parents should be scanning your phone no less than 2 or 3 times a week. It is your parents' device, and they need to be aware because you're really putting yourself in harm's way. So I just want to be clear about the messaging, that it's always about care and concern for kids, and it's always about parents of students who are minors and are under the age of 18. And for anyone who wants to know, Snapchat has a parent.snapchat.com that shows you how to mirror your child's Snapchat account, become a family center, so you can see everything that's going on. And they're working with us to provide safe environments for kids who, by the way, under 14 shouldn't even be on Snapchat, but that's another whole issue. So I just wanted to be clear that our messaging is consistent. We are partners with parents. We care incredibly about children. And our messaging is that we are working with parents, and parents have to work with us to keep their kids safe. Right? That is the messaging that I gave today. So I'm sitting here and keeping my mouth shut. But the children who have requested to have their names changed in our student information system, their parents are aware. We are the last to know. I'm just going to put that out there, that if you walk down the hallway of the middle schools, which I do every day, you can't tell. They're all dressed the same. Big and baggy. It's all over the place. I know. You guys are set, right? I see the same Crocs on boys, on girls. It doesn't matter. The principals that are sitting here know. So I think we have to stop for a second. The reality is we embrace diversity and we embrace all of our children. I don't care who's wearing what color, what kind of Crocs. And I think that what Mr. Dickstein is saying very, very soft-spokenly, but I need to just say, parents should be aware of what their children are doing, who they're interacting with, and having conversations. And that is part and parcel of us all working together in a pre-K through 8 district. Everyone under 14.
Michelle, I have another question. And correct me if I'm wrong, because my understanding is that this policy was never mandated. It was approved by error or by miscommunication from the,
No, here, I'll explain that.
how did that work?
It was, so the law that was enacted in 2017 listed, I don't have it in front of me, but say 5 or 6 things that were the law that they said that they would direct the Department of Education to issue guidance to schools in support of how to enact those laws, not enact them, but how to handle those requirements, how to implement those requirements. And when the Strauss Esme, who does our policy writing, as most districts use, took that law and translated it into 5756, the policy that's known today. It had an M on it. Understand that when law is enacted that a school district should have some sort of policy on, sometimes the M designation on the policy mandated means that it's either a requirement of a law that was enacted, or it's mandated because under NJQSAC, they'd be looking for a school district to have some sort of written policy encompassing these guidelines. So there was an M designation on that policy. It wasn't approved in error. Everybody knew what the law was. Everybody saw what the policy was. Whether there was confusion as to every element in that policy being law or not, I would say yes, there was. But most of what's all in 5756 is embodied somewhere in a statute. There are a few elements that went outside of that, including the parental notification requirement, where I think the guidance was supposed to help school districts and instead created a lot of distraction for a lot of boards of education in the state who really need to get back to educating the students, as you saw in Ms. Montgomery's report. And we're divided on it. We're a divided board, we're a divided state, we're a divided country, we're a divided world, for God's sakes. So there's a lot of misinformation out there as to this board enacting a policy erroneously. That did not happen. It's not black and white like that, and that's just wrong. Yes, there was an M designation on that policy, which meant mandated, and part of that is because 99% of that policy is embodied in law somewhere, so it technically is mandated. Maybe not all of it was, and some of it was just that a statute said, that a Board of Education should have some sort of policy on this, so they don't want you to get hit with CUSAC points. And I could let Bob tell you what happens when you get hit with CUSAC points. So you'd get a corrective action plan, and whatever.
And I think the confusion that's added to this whole issue is that the Attorney General Platkin issued a statement, if it was a public statement, saying that this wasn't even a mandated policy. So that's just adding more confusion.
I think he was referring to the parental notification piece of it, because that's specifically, right, what they were.
Yeah, it was more of a legal argument he was making.
Correct.
Based on that piece and based
Right.
on the fact that that the policy itself says no affirmative duty to inform.
Correct.
It doesn't say you inform or you don't inform.
And the statute never said anything about parental notification either way. So that was just added language. That created a nightmare for all of us. Thank you very much. Michael, did you want to add anything to that, or history, or did I say correctly? Or?
Yeah, no, I think everything that was said is on point. The idea that Strauss-Esme represents or provides policies for probably 90% of the school districts in the state of New Jersey, and they're the ones who put the M on there for your policy committees to review. And every district, when they see that M, they think that it's mandatory. What a true mandatory policy is, for example, your HIB policy. Because the HIB statute specifically says in the statute that school districts shall promulgate policies to enforce these statutes. That's what would make a true mandatory policy. As Michelle was saying previously, though, the M means mandatory in Strauss-Esme lingo, meaning that it's something that you should, as opposed to an optional, because you need to enforce the statute, and therefore this policy mirrors the statute. But the Attorney General's office, as part of the litigation in the Hanover case, did say, as part of oral argument, that the policy is not mandatory as it would be in the same realm as a HIB policy, where districts are required under the law, or districts are required under this statute to promulgate a policy. That's what the Attorney General admitted during oral argument.
It's the policy, it's not just the parental.
That's right. It's just the policy is not mandatory because the statute didn't mandate districts to promulgate a policy. It mandated the Department of Education to provide guidance. And that's all it said. And that's why the Attorney General admitted, as part of the Hanover case, that this policy, because everybody has the same 5756, that policy is not mandatory for school districts to have under the law.
But the elements that are in that policy were in that 2017 statute.
And 29, and revised.
And revised in, 2018.
And is covered in other areas.
Correct. So there isn't a Board of Education. I see a lot of people out there stating, that the boards adopted this erroneously. Whether a board adopted this policy or not, we'd still be doing the same thing, truthfully.
I also wanted to say a word about the survey itself, just FYI. And in interest of full disclosure, I was contacted by people on both sides of this issue, wondering if they voted correctly based on their own opinion. I think people were genuinely confused, so I wanna.
I would acknowledge that. It doesn't help that some people submitted, duplicative responses and caused Carrie extra hours of weeding through all the answers. We could have had our results a lot sooner. Mm-hmm. So that's a separate topic for another day. But in light of the fact that a bunch of us participated in the League of Women Voters candidate forum, we had one night to do a roundtable, and we couldn't get it done.
Yeah, and
So-
listen, that's a
It certainly seemed like, well, we were trying to reach out to people from the previous board meeting who got up and spoke to see if they wanted to form a small subcommittee to review these policies, but I didn't hear back from any of those people. So this seemed like the next best thing.
No, and I think we do a good job, generally speaking, of trying to involve people. And I get that this was a first attempt and maybe some things didn't work so well. And that's okay. I think it's important that we continue to do this. Like, I think it's important that we continue, especially like you said, Michelle, this is a polarizing issue. This is a polarized climate. But we've always done better here in Freehold Township. We've always been able to talk through issues that perhaps we disagreed with. I don't really understand the rush to try to get this done before we had that roundtable. Like, I think there was some pressure people felt to try to get that roundtable done before this meeting. I don't really get that.
Without a roundtable, I don't think this conversation is rushed. I think this board has known for months that this conversation was coming. I certainly don't feel rushed in it. After the Attorney General made his comments in Hanover, it opened up a forum to revisit this. Whereas before, knowing Marlborough, Manalapan, and Middletown were in the middle of litigation, why would we bring up this discussion? Do we need to join the litigation fray? Causing legal bills with all due respect, Michael. I make all of it the same way, but when we're doing it with taxpayer dollars, you have to be fair. So it wasn't the right. I didn't think it was the right time. I don't think many others thought it was the right time. I think that now, a few people thought it was the right time. I don't think it was rushed, but did you feel rushed? You want to speak?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Microphone works.
We didn't hear from you, so maybe.
No, that's okay. Yeah, and I agree with you. I don't feel it was rushed. And I like the idea that should we make a motion to put it for a first reading, that there would be a roundtable before the second reading. Is that correct?
I think that's the goal.
Sure, because I think we also owe it to the people that want this policy removed, that it at least be put on for a first reading. I don't even see this board tabling it again, and if we bring that up, personally, I don't have a problem with that. I would be willing to make a motion to at least put it on for a first reading so that we can put it on the floor, have the round table, and then it wouldn't officially be removed until after the round table. So I kind of feel that way. I think the evidence is overwhelming because of the parental component of this, that it's an overreaching and unnecessary policy, and our existing laws protect these students. So I see no necessity to leave a policy in place that's dividing the community needlessly, because our students are getting the correct services whether the policy is there or not. So, to Mrs. Cosino, I'm on your committee. I would be willing to make that motion. I don't want to create chaos or have people feel we need to table it, because I don't think anything really comes of it. Other than that, we will continue to deliberate it into a second reading. So I would just like to, that's all I really wanted to say.
Any other board member? So before we move on to, you want to take a break before public participation?
It's up to the board.
Yes? Okay.
Can I just explain? I see hands raised. The public participation is the opportunity to address the board. The rest of it is a board meeting in public that you're observing. The public participation component, I know some people are new to board meetings, happens next after that, at which time everybody has 3 minutes if they choose to make a statement.
Okay. I'm gonna make a motion to take a 5-minute recess to allow individuals to cool off, use the restroom, and then we will go right back into public participation. Can I have a second?
I'll second.
At the time it's 9:12.
Okay.
Don't like the answer, don't ask the question or not.
What's going on?
I was going to do a roll call for the board members. Mrs. Brand, Mrs. Coslino,
Here.
Mr. Gargiulo, Mrs. O'Sullivan, Mrs. Spellman,
Here.
Mrs. Venatoli,
Here.
Mr. Williams,
Oh, here.
Mr. Amoroso,
Here.
Mrs. Lambert.
Here.
We have our quorum again.
Okay. This will be the first opportunity for public participation for items that are on the agenda this evening, as well as our newly added discussion. If you would like to address the board, please write your name and address on the sign-in sheet. State your name and town for the video record. You're free to state your address for the video record, but if you don't want to, you could just put it on the sign-in sheet. Statements are limited to 3 minutes in length, should not be abusive, obscene, or defamatory in nature. So if anyone would like to address the board, please step to the podium.
Please write your full address on there as again.
Yeah, and please, not to sound like the handwriting police, but when you state, write your name, try to write it as neatly as possible because
You may not like the way I put it in the minutes.
if I want to follow up with a question, I can't find you.
Hey everyone, my name is Lily Jaffe. I have lived in Freehold Township for 26 years. I have been, can you hear me okay? Can everybody hear me okay? Sorry, I'm gonna hold it, sorry. Okay, do over. My name is Lily Jaffe. I'm a resident of Freehold Township. I've lived here for 26 years. I've been a nurse for 32. I have 4 adult children that all went to Freehold Township schools. I have great affinity, respect, and admiration for the education that they received here in Freehold Township. I did have prepared remarks, but I'm not referring to them because Mr. Dickstein, you answered a lot of what I had in my previous remarks, but I would like to say this. I do agree with Meg's suggestion in that this policy should remain in existence, and if we feel that we have issues with the policy, that perhaps we reword the policy so that it seems to me that the policy is being considered as abolished or to be abolished because of the it puts us at risk for litigation. I've heard that discussed a lot this evening. So if that is the case, perhaps we change it so that the policy does support the student, support the administration and the school system, but that we can have this policy in effect so that educators and anyone dealing with this very vulnerable student population will have guidelines to allow them to go through any processes with these students that may be needed. I respect and appreciate everything that you said, Mr. Dickstein, about how you manage the system, but as was mentioned last time by Michelle, we won't all be here forever. There will be, people following after us, and I believe a policy always serves the people who come after us, right? It's a way to protect this population. It's a way to provide guidelines for people who don't know how to navigate these waters. I don't see a policy as putting us at risk for litigation if it's created with that in mind and with the sole purpose of protecting this very vulnerable student population. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. There we go. I'd like to speak today from the perspective. Oh, I'm so sorry. Yes, my name is Nicole DePresca. I'm 81 Oriskany Drive. I'd like to speak today from the perspective of a parent of a transgender child in the Freehold Township schools. Our experience with our own child coming out as trans and working with the school has been absolutely phenomenal. Our son's guidance counselor and the entire admin team have gone above and beyond to create the safest environment possible for him, and they are there for him when any problems arise, and we really do feel like one team. This is possible because we, as the parents, came to the district in support of our child to want to work hand in hand with the school. And if I recall correctly from the last board meeting, this has been Freehold's experience so far, parents working hand in hand with the district, which is a wonderful thing. And although it may not have happened in Freehold yet, the day will come when the child confides that they are trans with a staff member, and it's simply not possible to tell their parents, as the parents may have fallen victim to fear and propaganda and misinformation and disinformation on trans issues, holding genuine disdain and contempt for trans people, creating an unsafe, unsupportive home. Since the child, and that's not always indicative of abuse in the home, right? I'd like to add that. You don't really know what's going on with the parents if there is no documented evidence of abuse. Since the child cannot change who they are, they could be stuck in a no-win situation, and they truly may not be safe, not just from physical abuse, but more often from psychological torment. These feelings can surely lead to depression, substance abuse, anxiety, and suicide, and that's not hyperbole. On occasion, a child needs to confide with a trusted adult, someone other than their parent, and the school provides that safe space. If that safe space is taken away, we run the risk of these kids having no one with whom they can safely share their feelings and gain support, trust, and resources. Now, even though the policy has to do with trans kids, and trans kids make up a tiny fraction of the school population, surprisingly enough, the part of the policy in question didn't even apply to our own trans kid, just like it wouldn't apply or affect 99.9% of all the parents in Freehold. But it's so important that the policy remains in place for that tiny, tiny subpopulation of trans kids whose lives would be in danger if a forced outing occurred. The policy would not only save that child's life, but it would protect the district as well when they realize how unsafe it would be to out a child in certain situations. In these rare cases, the district will find itself so grateful the policy exists and will immediately realize its worth. They just haven't experienced a specific case where that part of the policy is warranted yet. And if you parents in the room who are against this policy, I leave you with this. If you aren't fond of the policy, there's something that you can do to make it so the policy never affects your family. You can go home tonight and say these words to your child. Hey, just so you know, if you were ever questioning your gender or sexuality, we want you to know that we love you for who you are, and we've got your back 100%. Those simple words solve it all. It solves it all. If your child was questioning their gender and had no idea if they could talk to you about it, saying those words confirm that they can talk to you about it. And what a huge weight lifted that would be for your child.
Minutes are up. Thank you.
I have one more line. Can I say one more line?
One more line.
Okay. Do this for your own everybody. I understand. And if you do this for your own kid, you'll become the heroes of Freehold because it will allow the policy to only apply to this tiny subfraction of trans kids who don't have families as wonderful as yours. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Carmela Steele. I live in Freehold. I've lived here.
Carmela, hold the microphone up.
I've lived here for over 21 years, and I love this town just as much as all of you do. I think what we're arguing about here, and I hate to say arguing or disagreeing about, is how children are protected. Everyone in this room wants to see children protected, and I believe that children are most protected when the parents are involved and the parents know. And if the school is the one to bridge that conversation with a parent, that's fine, then bridge it. But removing this policy is still unacceptable, in my opinion, because if you still don't have it in place where you're going to notify parents, you're still putting a legal issue on the district as well. And we just heard that it's an at-risk population. Why do we want to not involve parents and tell them? And I've said this before, children are most protected when parents are involved. No one loves their children more than a parent. I can't understand that. Long after children are grown and out of the school, the parents are still involved in their care. In addition, this board here, you guys admitted that you guys put it in place, the people that are up for election in 2019. It wasn't mandated, and I know you said you had the little M on there, and I guess it was confusing, but if I were a board member and I was not happy with the way something read, I would investigate what we can do to change that and navigate it or figure it out whether it was mandated. And maybe we shouldn't be using Strauss, Esme, or whatever that policy writing organization is, and we should write our own policies or find another place to write policies. And if there's suspected abuse in the home, we should investigate it. Absolutely, 100%, no matter what the case is. We never want to leave a child like that. And I understand the bathroom law and stuff like that. What is the district going to do to protect female children that are in the bathroom and there's a trans female in the bathroom? Like, what is the district? I know that's law and that you have to allow a child to use the bathroom of choice, but what is the district going to do to protect those children in there? And yeah, they're not going to answer. They've said that they can't answer my questions. But yeah, so you're going to have like bathroom attendants. Like, I'm not suggesting that because I don't want our tax dollars to go up, but there needs to be something in place that would protect those children, girls. And it has happened where girls got raped and abused in a bathroom. Thank you.
Oh, you forgot to write your name.
I did, actually. I wrote it all the way up.
Oh, I see.
Did you want to say anything?
Got you. No problem.
I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Hey everybody, my name is Dash DePresca. I'm also 81 Oriskany. Nicole is my wife, and I will not be as eloquent as she was. Trust me, I had a whole thing planned out, and this is what it turned into. So, I'm just going to kind of go off of what I have been taking some notes off of your discussion. I'm an educator. I'm a middle school educator in a public school. I am also a parent of a trans child. I'm Nicole's spouse, and I myself am transgender. And here's the thing. You're the Board of Education. I'm an educator. We need to do what we do. We need to educate. We need to educate ourselves. Because as teachers, we need to constantly learn. And I heard a lot of the discussion about, and I don't think it was intentional, I just think it's a lack of education. I heard a lot of terminology that maybe wasn't exactly correct, or maybe just, ignorance to the fact. This roundtable that you're talking about is very important. And I, for one, volunteer whenever you need me to be part of it, to speak to that. Because I'm the lived experience. And I am part of this community, and we love it here. 13 years ago, we decided to start a family. We said we want to be in Freehold. That was it. We didn't do anything else. Because of the education system, as both teachers. And to think that, I want you to understand you already have trans kids. That you don't even, would not be on your quote-unquote radar. And that's because they come from affirming households. But you can't tell when a household isn't affirming. There may not always be that trail. Abuse is insidious at times and silent. So I'm all for having a conversation, but I see it in my own kids, my own students who've come to me, because I am the trusted adult. Yeah, I've sat there across from parents at conferences using the kids' given name by their parents because they know that if they're outed, they may not be in school the next day. And then what? And that's not hyperbole. We can do this. If we are the stewards of children, like you said, they're our kids, right? They're all our kids. Then we have to be that parent between, 8 and 3 or whatever it is. I'm sorry, I know I'm rambling here. I took a whole bunch of, notes here. I'm very encouraged that you're discussing this, but please don't miss the fact that right now trans people are the center of a culture war. And the survey, I read it a bunch of times, and as soon as they opened it, I said, oh my God, people are going to knee-jerk this and go from a place of what they're hearing in the media. And I think that's what happened. Those ones you got back in 20 minutes, that's exactly what happened, right? So we need to do a better job of bringing that forward, of actually talking about what the policy is, like you said. If it's not a net loss, then keep it. And earlier from Mr. Dixon, you said about how we affirm we protect all kids. If a house is on fire in a city, in a town block, a house and field's on fire, the firefighters show up, we're not going to look at the firefighters and say, well, what about all the other houses that could catch on fire? All houses do matter. And I think you know I'm going with this. Trans kids and trans people are at the center right now, and we are scared. And we have to make the schools a safe place. I'm an adult, 45 years old, and I'm scared. That's all the time.
Hi, good evening. Do I have to hold this like this? Okay. Hi, Doris Lynn. I'm a Freehold Township parent. My kids are now 14 and 20. I've lived here 25 years as an adult and 5 years as a kid. I went to Laura Donovan for grades 1 through 5. My daughter Maple is now a freshman at Communications High School. Sometimes the difference between a known abusive home and one where the child is just saying they don't want to tell the parents is the fact that the child hasn't told their parents yet. And I guarantee that there are children being abused at home right now and the school does not know. The district would benefit from an explicit policy that says there is no requirement to tell parents as an extra layer of protection. Also, I was dismayed to hear gender identity compared to disease. It is not a disease. The whole idea of notifying parents treats gender identity as a disease or a misbehavior that the parents need to be notified about. Why aren't the parents being notified that their child is cisgender?
Exactly.
Also, when my daughter was in 8th grade at Barcelo, she knew 2 kids who were transgender who were afraid to tell their parents. These kids are here in our community and they are afraid. And regarding the no one loves a child more than a parent, there are some homeless transgender youths who would disagree with that. Thank you.
My name is Pastor Pat Medley. I've lived in Freehold Township for 25 years. I was the pastor at Hope Lutheran Church, Hope Christian School, for 18 years. I have pastored transgender youth and adults. And I'm an educator. I have an education degree before I went to seminary. Part of my seminary education was I took the course on human sexuality at Rutgers Med School. What do pastors know about sex? We know a lot about sex. We do weddings, we counsel with families. We see the whole family, not just the student that shows up in the classroom. So we're aware of some of the dynamics in families because we see the whole family very often. My anxiety about if we abolish this policy is that transgender students are going to think that the school will automatically out them. They're going to guess that that might be the case. And without breaking confidentiality about the families that I have pastored, many of those children they were suicidal before their parents were notified by them or with the help of people that they trusted. If we eliminate from the student's mind a trusted teacher, counselor, coach, that could mean some children will die. And I'm really worried about that. So that's one of the reasons I think this policy is essential. I would not eliminate it. I'll just quickly say, for those that aren't aware, in the womb, we all start out female. We have mapped the human genome. We do know now, for example, the genetics that lead to a male's testicles not descending. We know, I had a person who came to me and said, "Do you want to hear my story?" I said, "Yeah, tell me your story." I never felt like I was a boy. I had external male genitalia, but I never felt like I was a boy. I was an Eagle Scout Marines. I had pain. They took me to the hospital and said, "Oh, you probably have to have your appendix out." He had cancer of the ovaries. I just think that, and people will say, "Oh, God doesn't make mistakes." No, God makes people in very diverse ways. Now, I just think we can't imagine that we know enough to make decisions for people.
They have to discover who they are. And kids today, they go online, they say, I wonder who I am. And they start discovering some of the wonders of that.
Hello. That's a tough act to follow. My name is Tina Crafton. I live in Freehold Township since 2006. Some of you may remember my children who are now grown. I want to say thank you so much for that call back to Mr. Severo.
Yeah, exactly.
He really did embody what we want for all the kids, that, you know, school is a safe place. I'm going to ask two rhetorical questions, which to think about, not asking you to answer them, but will you, if you repeal the current policy, which is to work with children to get them to talk to their parents, if you reveal that and you go for a more mandatory reporting, will you fully disclose to students anything you tell me, we're telling your parents? Full disclosure, like the Miranda rights. Anything you say can and will be reported to your parents. Number two, what impact would that have on those who want to report abuse within their home? Once word gets out that there's not a safe space, that it's going to be, bam, your parents will know. They may misinterpret or misunderstand kind of what like Pastor said and think, I can't tell. So I just wanted to leave you with those thoughts, not meant for you to answer. And you know what? Thank you. You guys have a hard job.
All right.
Hi, I'm Josh Kirstein. I currently work as a substitute teacher. I've worked with students in a wide variety of jobs, swimming instructor, substitute teacher, karate instructor, just all kinds of jobs with kids. One thing that I've noticed is that you can't always know if, I know a lot of people are saying you don't know if the kid's being abused, but it goes even later where you don't know how the parent will respond to everything. Even if it's not abusive, it could be very alienating. Even just as far as just, oh, I'm not going to say I don't approve your lifestyle, but now I'm no longer going to look at you the same way. I'm not going to talk to you the same way. And I feel like, as was discussed throughout the meeting, you guys were saying, oh, if I see any example of abuse, I'm not going to tell anyone. There's not always a sign of abuse. There's not even always a sign that they'll respond negatively, to the point where not even every kid knows if they'll respond negatively, which is why they most likely came to you in the first place before going to their parent. I think that it shouldn't be appealed it shouldn't be removed in the first place because it's not doing any harm at all. If anything, it's keeping you guys less liable, because other schools that have removed it have already been brought, or they had complaints, and I believe a suit has already started coming up with the other schools. I believe it was Manalapan, Englishtown, and Millstone. I think so. Was Millstone? I'm sorry, I amended it. I apologize for my miswording there. But I think one person actually had a really good idea, which was Ms. Tom. Sorry, which was, if you don't like the wording of it, just work on the wording. There's no reason to remove it, and as a few people have said, if you remove it, you're going to remove some level of trust, because not everyone even understood the wording of the survey that you guys were saying. Not everyone understands the wording of the actual issue of the I'm sorry, of the policy. Thank you. I lose my train of thought there. Sorry. But if they don't even understand the policy and they just hear, oh, well, they removed the thing that might have been protecting me, they might not even be able to get that explained to them because they're not going to trust you anymore to come to you with that problem. They're not going to say like, oh, did you remove this? Because now they don't trust you in the first place at all. You have to remember that there's a certain level of trust, and I think that trust with transgender students has gotten better with the policy, not worse, and I think you're just going to be held more liable, not less. That's all I wanted to say.
Okay. Good evening. Wait, do I push something or? Okay. Okay. Good evening. My name is Louise Walpin, and I live in South Brunswick. I'm a retired psychiatric nurse practitioner with over 25 years of experience, and have treated many children and families from Freehold over the years. My wife of 34 years and I have had 3 adult children and 3 grandchildren. Today I'll be speaking with my psychiatric nurse practitioner hat on, although my mother hat never leaves. I'm going to start off with something I prepared, then I'm going to wing it a little. I'm going to tell you about one of my clients, to a face to the statistics you hear. N was a 9-year-old trans female who came out to her parents 6 months before I met her because a trusted adult suggested she should. She had a good relationship with her parents, but was afraid they wouldn't accept this news. She was right. Her disclosure was met with anger, invalidation, and threats. Her parents told her if she continued on this path, she'd be dead to them. Faced with having to choose between living as her true self and losing her parents, she attempted to hang herself. That attempt was interrupted and she was hospitalized. But even then, parents refused to discuss her gender identity. There was no history of abuse, so DCP and police said intervention was not warranted. We sent her home after hospitalization. We knew in all likelihood she would return, and she has since attempted suicide several times. I've heard a lot during this election cycle about parental rights to know. I'm a mother and grandmother. Of course I agree with that. But contrary to what you've heard, Policy 5756 does not endorse keeping secrets from parents. Rather, it serves to protect trans children like Emma by helping them to traverse this difficult journey safely. Imagine how your staff will feel if they were the ones who outed Emma to her parents because there was no prior history of domestic conflict or abuse. She had a good relationship with them, and then she attempted suicide. In my professional experience, if a child is afraid to tell their parents, there is a reason. And now I'm just going to wing it, but it's still with my psychiatric nurse practitioner hat on. I don't know how many of you are therapists, but we're taught to listen to our guts. And I'm sitting here, and keep in mind I'm an adult, I'm a grandmother. My wife and I were the lead couple in the fight for marriage equality, both legislatively and in the Lambda legal suit. That one marriage will actually be married 10 years in a few days. And I'm sitting here worried about, do I come out? Don't I come out? Why? Because I hear a lot of good intentions. I do want to say that, and I thank you for that. I'm also hearing, yes, we have sensitivity training, but I'm hearing, like someone else mentioned, vocabulary that doesn't exist. And I wonder if children hear that. You know, whether it's words like transgenderism or transgendered. The term is how much? See? Okay, can I just finish with the? Okay, words matter. And if it makes someone like me feel anxious, I can only wonder how the kids feel when you're sitting in the room. I urge you to please keep this child in your mind and do not repeal 5756. It provides the necessary guidance to your staff and protects students. Thank you.
Am I doing this right? Where do I speak into? Like this? Oh, there it goes. Jacob Pender, Rutgers, New Brunswick. I signed up earlier. Oh, it looks like it's a different one. I'll sign up at the end. Jacob Pender, Rutgers, New Brunswick. And I want to talk a little bit about what some members talked about parents' rights and how it's important that parents are involved. And the best thing for a child is if a parent's involved. And I completely agree with that. And you know who else knows that? Not just the 9 people or 8 people here sitting here on the board, but every single child knows that as well. So the best idea is to think if a child is in a protective, safe home, that they will come out to their parent first, who has raised them their entire life, as opposed to a teacher who they've known for likely less than 9 months. And if there's not, there's probably a reason for that. And that's a reason that a teacher or a school official does not need to know. That's a reason that they do not need to get in between the life of a child and their parent. Let me put 5756 into perspective for everyone, just for a second. Imagine you're working at a big box store, and you have tons of departments, and one of those departments is a gun counter, and you're selling guns. And there's a lot of employees. You have hundreds of employees. It's a big box store, and they could be working anywhere, any day. Their job is fluid. And one day they say, hey, you need to work at the gun counter. So the employee goes to the gun counter, and he's told how he needs to sell a gun. So he looks into his employee handbook and sees no regulations, no nothing. Now that employee could be someone very familiar with New Jersey laws on how you need to register someone, on how you need to do a background check on selling a gun. That person might. That person may also be their first day ever seeing a gun, or their first day ever selling a gun. That may be their first time ever doing that. And that person's going to look at that handbook, see nothing, and they're going to assume that they sell it the same way they sell everything else. Because in that handbook, they're not seeing that. It's not up to the employee to look at New Jersey state laws, to know every single New Jersey state laws to do their job. It is your job to provide policies to the teachers, to the staff of this school district. You keep citing all these things are already protected in the New Jersey laws against discrimination, all these different things. But where is that in Freehold? If you repeal 5756 in Freehold, what other policy is in place? What are you putting in instead of 5756 to reflect that Freehold supports the New Jersey laws against discrimination? How do teachers, how do staff members support those laws and follow those laws? And lastly, I would like to ask, because someone said whether we keep it or not, we're subject to litigation. 5756 has been in place for 4 years, since 2019. So I'd like to ask the board attorney how many lawsuits, how much litigation has been brought up against this board over the policy 5756 in the past 4 years. Thank you. All right, we're not going to get provided an answer on that? Okay.
Push this. Can you hear me okay? Okay, can you hear me okay? Okay. Before I read a statement, I want to say that my name is Janice Ironic. I live in Freehold Township, and I'm a member of the Monmouth County League of Women Voters, and I thank candidates who participated in a very wonderful, respectful forum last night. I didn't really plan on reading this statement tonight, but after hearing the word parents and parents and parents and parents, I'm a parent, and I have a background in special education, and everybody is sort of acting as if every child has two perfect parents. Well, I had an extremely emotionally abusive marriage to someone very narcissistic who hasn't spoken to my daughter in 17 years because she finally called him out on all of the lies. And this was all when she was like, 15, 16, where things were really difficult. The school didn't know what was going on. But God forbid, in her situation, if she had had to come out to a parent, or like when you talk about these perfect parents and families, do you tell both parents? Who decides which parent to tell? Or if they've got
My ex-husband had kids from his first marriage, so there's stepmothers and stepfathers and mothers and fathers and divorces and all kinds of stuff. It's a really complicated road if you decide that you're going to do that. Do you notify the parent in 30 days or do you notify them in 45 days? And what if the school year is almost over and then they're going to be going to another school? Do you force the child to tell the parents before school is out, or do you wait until next year when they have a different teacher? But I really wasn't going to read my statement, but I just really feel that I need to because of the way that things have gotten so political. And the League of Women Voters, while it supports issues, wants critical thinking, discussion, respectful discussion, and support for issues without worrying about who's going to run for what position, who's on the ballot, who's not on the ballot. Basically, the League of Women Voters has a long history of advocating for the rights, health, and education of children, defending our democracy and ending discrimination against the LGBTQ plus community go hand in hand. We are gravely concerned with proposed policies that put students' safety and mental health at risk and violate New Jersey's law against discrimination. Public schools are a cornerstone of democracy, and New Jersey should strive to ensure our schools are safe, inclusive, and welcoming for all. Proposals like this are causing extreme political polarization over maybe one child, maybe 3 children. It's also causing an increased distrust in public education and civic engagement. Outing children puts them at risk for bullying, harassment, and discrimination. It makes them more vulnerable for self-harm and suicide. Here's the bottom line. If a child is not sharing information about their sexuality or gender identity with their caregivers, those grown-ups should be concentrating on the environment they're fostering within the 4 walls of their own home, instead of attacking and blaming the school where the child might feel safer. And I'm sorry I don't get to finish reading it. But I will email a copy to you.
I didn't realize my mic wasn't on the whole time. Would anybody else like to address the board?
Hi, my name is Megan Verikin. I'm a substitute with the district. Pretty much everyone has already addressed the points I wanted to make. So I really only have one more point. And before I begin, I do want to thank you all for the clarity and candor, regarding this policy and that it was made more clear. Policy 5756 might not be mandatory, but it's still very much needed. It was enacted for a reason. I understand there's still, some ambiguity in the policy, but it still lays out extensive guidelines and it includes protections that have not been laid out as clearly in other laws, including, more extensive staff training and assurance that a child won't be outed if that's not what the child wants. I can't attest to the training full-time teachers get, but I know as a substitute teacher, we don't get enough training regarding, education and sensitivity surrounding these topics. It's very basic. It's a very brief course online. I think there needs to be, more education, more clarity, and I think that training would provide that. That's why this policy is needed, to provide education, to, make sure there's no misinformation going around. That's pretty much all I wanted to say. More training is needed. Thank you.
Hello.
Hi, I'm Cheryl Palu. Is this on? Live in Freehold Township.
Can you lift your mic so they can hear you in the back?
Oh, what do I have to do? Oh, I'm sorry. Thanks.
That's
My name is Cheryl Palu. I live in Freehold Township Schools, and I'm here to support the rescindication of 5756. The policy violates parental rights, my right to know what's going on with my child. I am very empathetic to children, unfortunately, dealing with gender dysphoria and the families that have to deal with that as well. However, the school should be advocates of bringing the child to the parent and not keeping them separated from the parent. If the child has an issue, the parent should be the ones to know. The parent is the one who loves their child the most, more than anybody else in this room or at school or anywhere else. The majority of children have loving parents. There are some kids who may not, but the majority do. So to say that a parent is the one who they should be afraid to go to is ridiculous, okay? Children who are feeling, that things are not going the way they should will always have some apprehension of saying something to their parents. That's normal. Just like if a child or a girl got pregnant, they'd be, somewhat apprehensive to tell their parents. A teacher or a counselor, maybe somebody they can trust to go to discuss the topic, but the role of the teacher or the counselor should be is to get the child speaking to the parent, not the opposite. This policy goes against the rights of parents, and any one of you, I would think, would want to know what would be going on with your child in school. Okay, so I think sometimes it's hard to do the right thing, but the right thing is to abolish this policy. It is not mandatory. And as far as education is concerned, I think there is a lack of education on this topic of gender dysphoria throughout the entire school system, and as far as I'm concerned, the state. Because if you educated yourself on the issue, you would know that it is not the way forward for a child to be affirmed in their identity that way. They need mental assistance to, yeah, you can disagree.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Please let the speaker
You can
speak.
disagree.
Let
That's
the speaker
okay.
speak. Thank
But
you.
the facts are facts. Do your research. There's plenty of regret out there. Okay? So it's not the place of the school to usher a child into a transition. Okay? That's a family matter. So I am here to support the motion to remove this policy from the school. Thank you. Oh, just one other thing. The children are protected under New Jersey LAD anyway, so there are protections already in place.
Hi, my name is Sherry, and I agree with Cheryl.
Can you state your full name?
Oh, Sherry Canagua, sorry.
And town?
I agree with Cheryl. I'm from Freehold also. And I think that parents should be notified. Let's say a kid is going through something, and it's a phase or a fad, and you go ahead and you protect this child, and the child doesn't want to go down this route, but because of peer pressure or whatever, the child goes down this route, and they don't want to. And if you don't tell the parent doesn't know. What if the parent can help the child? So I agree. I think it should be, it should stay. Thank you.
Okay, it's on. Hi, I'm Michael Caligassi. So I am in agreement as well of abolishing the policy. I think I could speak for the majority of the people surrounded by myself and my neighbors. We're also in agreement because we are very active parents. We want to be involved in our children's lives, and I would want to know if something's going on. For example, I forget all the ages, but like if my child was to show up at the mall to get her ears pierced, she couldn't do it without me there. If they wanted to get a tattoo, they couldn't do it without me there either. I could consent, I could let them get a tattoo at 15, but if something's going on in school, somebody's bullying somebody in school, if my child graffitied on the lockers or something in school, of course the school is going to call me. So why would an important topic like this, if somebody was going to come up, if my child was deciding or not sure what was going on, I want to know so I could help them, so I could guide them, so I could take them to talk to them, whatever it's going to be. I didn't say I was going to, not listen to them. I'm not going to disown them. I want to know what's going on though, and I think that's the right thing to do as a parent, because I could say from the majority of the people in this town, probably even the surrounding towns, these are family towns. Most families are for their children. I understand there are other people made points that yes, there are parents, there's dysfunctional families and whatever. No offense to that, but I'd say the majority of the people that I'm surrounded with, their parents care about their children. We do everything. I just got back from practice. I mean, we're in the field at night, So, I mean, that's it. I mean, I wanted to keep it simple, but I think the bottom line is I want to know. I don't think that should be hidden. My child can't get a tattoo without me knowing. So I think this is more important than a tattoo. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Michelle Gresner. I am a resident of Monmouth County. I am a teacher in Monmouth County, and I'm a parent of a child of Monmouth County. I actually went to Buckler School and West Freehold and Laura Donovan and Township High School.
Your town, please.
Pardon? Oh, my town is Neptune. So the reason why I'm here tonight to support keeping 5756 is because as a teacher for over 20 years, I've definitely seen amazing parents who, and I appreciate that the parents cannot understand that there are students who cannot tell them their parents things. I appreciate that. They love their kids so much, and they will accept, just like the gentleman before me said, whatever his kid needs, he's there. That's great. And most of the parents that I interact with in the schools where I teach are the same, but there are many that are not that way. And 5756 provides a little more protection for that very, very vulnerable population. And I'm an elementary school teacher, and I have over 20 years, I've only had 2 students who have ever told me that they were misgendered. One whose family was very supportive, and we were able to we worked really well with them. And a lot like what Mr. Dickstein was saying, like when you bring the family in and you have the conversation, you make the plan. And then I had another student who hid under my desk every day because he didn't want to go home. And the reality is that happens. And I'm sorry. I'm actually not sorry. I'm happy for those of you who have no idea what that looks like. But I do know what that looks like. And 5756 isn't for me and it isn't for you. But it's for the parents who aren't here. And it's for the kids who can't speak at home. So please keep 5756 because you don't know what's coming. You talked earlier about how the demographics are changing in Freehold. So it's an amazing community. It was when I grew up here too. But it might be changing. So the more protections that you can provide for the people who are coming here, the better. And if it's not harming anybody, and it's really not, and it's not changing anything about the way that you really do everything, please keep it. Please keep the kids safe. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, Hi, my name is Adam Kriegel, 3202 Jessica Circle. So I recently moved here from Staten Island, the stereotypical move. But we moved here not because of the price of houses or because we really wanted, a bigger house, but we moved out because the education system in New York was failing us. And we picked Freehold specifically because of the statistics here. And my son has thrived here. He goes to Erickson, he's in 3rd grade. He is the happiest boy I've ever seen. And it's only getting better. I am a veteran, I'm a cop for the Army, I'm a firefighter, and I have lived all around the world. And I have been in contact with thousands of people from different nationalities and cultures. And I was in the Army in February of 2012 when the don't ask, don't tell policy was stricken. And it was a great moment. People came out that were scared, that didn't know what to do, and they were accepted. And I truly embrace everyone, no matter who they are. But as a parent, a lot of people here have said all the negatives that can happen. But no one has really said the positives that can happen out of informing parents. And it's equal parts. Yes, bad things can happen, but some good can come out of it as well. As a firefighter, we can't save every house. We try, and we try to save as many lives as possible. So, if telling the parent, unfortunately there may be bad repercussions, but there can be some good ones out of it as well. I'm not saying it's a bad or a good thing, but we have to keep the parents informed. This is going to be maybe a bad analogy, but a lot of people said how if the news comes home, the parents can react horribly. And again, this may be a really bad analogy, but there are parents out there that if their kids come home with a very low grade on their test, it could end very bad. So, do we not tell the parents test grades anymore either? Because I know parents personally who have beaten their children for low grades, beaten them. So when do we stop? That is my biggest fight. I'm not saying this policy is horrible or it's good, but I'm just saying, when does it stop? When do we pick what we tell the parents?
Thank you. Your 3 minutes are up. If you could wrap up quickly. Thank you. I want to remind everyone when you address the board to face the board.
Okay. Okay, so I spoke at, I don't know if it was the last meeting or the
Your name,
meeting.
please?
Oh, sorry, my name is Mary Waddell. I live in Freehold Township. And I told the story before, I'm not going to tell it again, but I just want to say about Mr. Dickstein and Diane Brethauer. This district does a great job of finding the balance. And I think it's really important that we keep the lines of communication open. And like what that man just said, if we can all acknowledge that this is can be a really, really difficult issue for these kids going through this, wouldn't it be great to think if there's a kid who's keeping the secret and they're having emotional problems about it or whatever, who's taking care of them when they go home at night? Who's aware, when they're in their room and maybe there was somebody on the bus that was harassing them, even though they're not supposed to. Maybe there was somebody who was picking on them in the classroom when they're not supposed to. The teachers can't see everything. Wouldn't it be nice to know that the schools and the parents are communicating the way they always do here? And they've done a great job. And I just want to say, I think this policy has just been nothing but divisive. And I'd like to see it go away so we can just get back to what you guys have always done is a great job. And I think we've always worked well together. And I just want to see that continue and have the fighting stop. And that's it.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to address the board? Okay. Yes.
I would just, sorry. I would just ask, again, my name is Lori Jaffe, I'm from Freehold Township. If the policy remains, the policy as it is written does not prevent someone from communicating with parents. Is that correct?
Correct.
It doesn't prevent notification.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Would anybody else like to address the board? Okay. Okay. Seeing nobody, we are going to move on to Personnel Committee. I believe the only person from that committee here tonight is Ms. Bellin. So, Meg, you have to move. Okay. Sorry.
Yeah.
Hold on. Where'd my board docs go? Okay, I'll have to get hard copy. All my notes. Okay. No. Okay. The Personnel Committee did not meet this evening. I would like to move the following item. Number 2, resignations as listed. New employment as listed. Establish start date as listed. Change of assignment and salary adjustments as listed. Change of assignment for the school year 2023-2024 as listed. Extend or change long-term assignment as listed. Leaves of absence as listed. Curriculum committee as listed. PTO honoraria as listed. And thank you to the PTOs for all of these wonderful activities that they enable us to have. District honoraria as listed. District honoraria update as listed. Volunteer as listed. Long-term substitutes as listed. Certified substitutes as listed. Non-certified substitutes as listed. Salary adjustments as listed. And that is it. Did I miss anything? Does anybody have any questions on any of the items? I have one question. In new employment, why would somebody be highlighted?
They were added after the agenda was published on Friday.
I thought
Try to
so,
do
but I
that so it
wasn't
stands
sure.
out.
Oh, okay, sorry, my mic is not on. Okay, then, can I have a second?
I'll second.
Roll call?
Mrs. Brand?
Yes.
Mrs. Coslino?
Yeah.
Mrs. O'Sullivan?
Yes.
Mrs. Spellman?
Yes.
Mrs. Venditoli?
Yes.
Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Amoroso?
Yes.
Mrs. Lambert?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Motion carries.
Thank you, Doug.
Okay.
Don't tell him I said that.
Well, it's on the record now.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on to curriculum and policy. And when we move into this, we need to decide whether we are going to do the first reading.
I'd like to make a motion.
Talk.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I want
I'd like to make a motion to put policy 5756 on a first reading for abolishment.
since we have our board attorney, I'm going to make a motion to table. Okay, so we have to vote the table first.
I'll second the motion to table.
Hold on 1 second.
Sorry.
Catalina. And that was Mrs. Feldman, I think, hit the first for Mr.
No, Mary did. Mary.
No, Mary did the first, I think. Megan
No.
second. Jeff.
Jeff.
Second motion to table.
Okay. So, is that a roll call vote?
We're on the motion to table.
Motion to table.
Roll call.
Yes.
One of our ethical obligations is to confine my board action to policymaking, planning, and appraisal, and I will help frame policies and plans only after the board has consulted with those who will be affected by them. This puts a duty on the board to delay actions until we truly can understand and digest the information available on the topic, the concerns of our community, and how best to serve the interests of our primary constituency, our kids. That is why I am supportive of the community roundtable, where we can do what we have done before with controversial issues that have lots of misinformation swirling from outside groups, and have a conversation with their parents, community members, teachers, and kids as to what eliminating this policy would mean to them. I think we tried to gather that information input via survey, but that format is not conducive to the conversation and good information we hope to share. I think it proved challenging to develop questions that were not confusing, as many folks on both sides expressed concerns to me that they answered the question, quote, wrong. I am making a motion to table this until we've had a chance to understand and explain more clearly the impacts of removing this policy and the community's feedback as to whether those impacts make sense for Freehold Township. It is a way to turn down the political noise on this issue and talk about the actual issues at play. We know that the intention of this policy was to protect a highly vulnerable group of students. Transgender youth are 2 to 2.5 times more likely to attempt suicide. They are more likely to be homeless and to be rejected by their parents. Not that they all will be. We've heard from parents tonight, obviously, that that's not the case anymore. But we also know that LGBTQ youth that report having at least one trusted adult were 40% less likely to report a suicide attempt in the last year. This is what prompted the legislature to act 8 years ago to try to foster a supportive environment in our schools. They did so in an overwhelming bipartisan fashion. And the bill was signed into law, as you pointed out, Michelle, by Chris Christie. This board adopted the policy that came out of that unanimously as well for the same reason. The goal here was to protect kids. So if we're going to get rid of this policy, we need to recognize that transgendered students are a small minority that has historically been subject to discrimination. In fact, in this very district last year, there was at least 15 incidents where kids here in Freehold Township were subjected to bullying because of their perceived sexual orientation or perceived gender nonconformity. Those are the incidents we knew about. If we're seeking to remove this policy, which was designed to protect these most vulnerable kids, we need to understand the implications of doing so. I don't feel I'm in a position to do that. That's why I made the motion to table.
Mrs. Lambert, can I respond also? Yeah, this motion for the public. Sure. This motion for the public is to do a first reading. And with respect to your comments, Mrs. Cozzolino, we would have a roundtable before the second reading. So it opens up the possibility that something can come up at the roundtable to educate board members if they feel that they want to vote a different way. But an overwhelming majority of the community would like this policy rescinded and perhaps replaced one day with a policy written by professionals and lawyers that know how to write this policy properly, where it does not infringe on parental rights. There were some wonderful things that Meg pointed out that are in the policy that we could preserve. So I'm not opposed to adopting a policy in the future that may not infringe on parental rights. But right now I'm pretty cemented in my position to abolish because of that element of it. So I want to make that perfectly clear. I sympathize with all the other elements. So just to put it out there, that's why I feel like we're ready to do a first reading and then have the roundtable, and then we have the second reading, and it provides plenty of opportunity for debate. Thank you.
Like, can I ask a question to Mike? Okay. Mike, why couldn't we do it all hand in hand? Like you clearly said that you're open to some sort of policy down the line. Why couldn't we do this all hand in hand and collect additional data?
Probably Mr. Gross could answer that better than me, but he probably won't, obviously, right now. But that policy already was written once, and look what happened. So I feel like it's not going to be this board that's going to have the brain power to put that policy in place that the whole state's going to adopt. I think it has to go back to the legislature, back to the people that are going to write these policies and implement them in the schools. It causes chaos for us. And now we're sitting here holding the sandbag. So the state should take a look at what's happening with the controversy over this policy and rewrite it and keep the good points that are in it, take out the points that violate parental rights. And then it would be something that wouldn't be so controversial. But I don't know that this board can do that. And Mrs. Lambert could maybe expand on that, but that's my opinion anyway.
To answer that, I don't know. I'm not saying having a policy down the line after this one is abolished, if it is abolished, is out of the question. I understand why most members would want a policy just to have a little extra reassurance, despite understand the elements of the policy that would stay in place are already in place in statute. And the ones that we're arguing about are not going to stay in place. And the townships that amended the policy to address that one issue are currently tied up in court. So that's why it can't be done hand in hand. It needs to be done more linearly, in my opinion. But I would think that we would have to consult our board attorney ad nauseum before we took further action on any type of amendment. I wouldn't want to call it amendment. I would want it up to be a whole brand new policy. That's not going to happen overnight. Whether the rest of the state wants to adopt a different, our policy, should we put one in place? Go right ahead, but that's not gonna happen overnight. I mean, and this has been a discussion that's taken the better part of a year, the better part of our resources, our time. And at some point, we need to decide what we want to do with it and put it to bed so we can move forward. Whether it's on a first reading tonight or not a first reading tonight, it's going to end up on a first reading, I'm sure, at some point. So,
I seconded the motion to table it because, as you said before, if we repeal the policy, nothing's going to change. We've already been doing these communications plans with the parents. It seems performative to me to repeal this policy now. When nobody's being affected, no parents' rights are being affected, and nothing is going to change in the daily operations of the school, except that children who may be entering our schools in this vulnerable community, from this vulnerable community, will lose a sense and a guarantee that if they are not comfortable and they are fearful, that they could be outed in a way that could cause them harm. So I think that, yes, could this policy be better? Sure. I'm not opposed to that, but I don't think that we should be repealing this policy without anything in its place.
I will say this much regarding student awareness of our policies. I think that you would be hard-pressed to find most students who are aware of all our policies and what they provide. And I think Dr. Brethauer could speak better to this as a middle school principal. Our students come into school all the time, and if they self-incriminate, where middle school staff has to stop them in their tracks and say, understand what you are telling me. I'm going to have to tell your parent. And they go anyway. They go anyway. I don't know that anything that goes on in this, we are a K through 8 district. This is not a high school district. If we were a high school district, I would venture to say that they would be way more aware of the actual policies. I don't know how much weight I put in that argument when our students are 3 years old to 13, 14, personally. But I welcome being debunked on that. That's just how I personally feel on that.
They are aware of what we tell them, what we teach them. They have no idea who you are. They don't know what a Board of Education does. They have no idea. They just know what we do. They know what we say and our actions, that we care about them more than anything in the world and will do anything to protect them. That's what they know because that's what they feel. And that's it. And I respectfully hear all that what you're saying. I am very saddened that we are sitting here. Becky did a beautiful presentation tonight, and we are not talking about students and their achievement and their growth. We are talking amongst ourselves. We have divided ourselves as a board, and I am heartbroken, having worked in this district for 23 years. I have never, ever, ever, ever started the application to put in my retirement papers, but I'll tell you right now, this is one of the most disheartening conversations that we've endured for over a year.
Yeah.
Michelle,
That's why I wish it was never brought up. Super cool.
I'd like to make a statement also. I think that the majority of this policy may have been just a divided one, because all the safeguards in place for the kids are in place in the schools. The parents are being communicated with eventually, or with, understanding from the kids. I think this is going just against, like Diane said, to bring people to discussion and contradiction. I think I support Mike and I support Neil and Michelle. I think we all are basically saying the same thing. The children are protected. We want them protected, but we also want parents to be protected. It's not about stepping in between a parent and a child. And it's not about hurting a child or outing a child. It's about doing what's best for a child. The oldest people we have, the oldest children, the oldest students we have are 13 or 14 years old. Do you let them smoke a cigarette? Do you let them drink a shot of whiskey? No. We take them and nurture them and teach them what's right. And down the line, when they're ready, they can make their own decisions. So one of the parents out there said there were regrets, and there are regrets. They're showing people after 18, after puberty, that have changed their minds and realized that they made a big, huge mistake. And they're the ones committing suicide. They're the ones in depression. They're the ones with nervous breakdown. So I think we should just slow down and let parents be open with their kids. Thank you.
Can I respond to Your Honor? I'm going to try to do this the best possible way I can. Since the first day you've been coming to board meetings and now elected as a board, you raised that flag for parental rights. Okay? And I agree. Right? Parents need rights. The problem is that you've perverted the term parental rights. You brought politics into this. You're not for parental rights because you just literally just said you were for the kids.
Please stop.
And because again, I talk to parents throughout the district.
I disagree. Renata, let him speak.
Okay.
We need to be respectful of one another. He's speaking his opinion. You need to let him speak.
Thank you, Michelle. I've asked parents who asked me questions about the survey, and they brought up parental rights to me, and I asked them, what rights do you feel that you're not being provided by the Freehold Township Board of Education? Not what they might have read of something that's happened in Marlboro or Howell or any other surrounding town. I'd be very hard pressed to get an answer to that question. Matched with the fact that we did have a survey that Ms. Montgomery presented the results like Carly said, over 90%, I don't know the exact number, somewhere between 90 and 97, let's call it. So they have knowledge of what goes on in our schools. So, again, what rights are we taking away from parents? I would like someone to answer that question. And you sit here, you wave the flag for parental rights, so maybe you can answer that question. What rights, as a parent of a child within the school, am I not getting? Because I'm in the 97%. I know what's going on with my children on a day-to-day basis. So, again, I agree with Dr. Bethhauser as well that we have more important business to attend to district-wise. 100%. This was brought under this flag of parental rights. And in Freehold Township, what rights are we denying our parents? Nobody's been able to answer that question.
Can I answer that question?
Oh, please.
Because parental rights are being offended when kids aren't spending time studying, when 54% of our kids are learning and not at the 80% that they were before the pandemic. We kept our kids home for a year. They were forced to wear masks. They were forced to be subjected to emotional harm. These emotions carry with them every day in school. I mean, I don't know. There were classes that that many parents were offended by, but no one paid attention to the round table with that, and they were legislated by law. I'm talking about the sex education classes in the second through 8th grade. Mm-hmm. So those offended a lot of people.
We don't teach sex education in 2nd grade.
Well,
to be clear,
there's classes regarding those.
Okay, then can I respond? I don't want to feel like I'm interrupting you, but
go ahead.
Okay.
Keep it quick.
One quick question.
We'll have an executive session.
No, I apologize.
I need a break.
Okay. Would you agree that a parental right of opting out of the health and phys ed curriculum, would that be considered a parental right?
They should have had parental opt-in.
Understand, but we've heard that story.
Conversations. I'm going to end that conversation. That's irrelevant. We need to get back to the business at hand, which is that we have a motion on the table to put on for a first reading abolishing. I'm getting there. I'm getting there. 5756, to which Mary countered with a motion to table that motion. So, the first motion that needs to be voted on is the motion to table Mike's motion. Are we ready to vote on that? And do a roll call?
Roll call. Well, we're doing the table.
We're voting to table.
A yes vote will table the motion, and there will be no action on that policy.
Tonight.
Wait, say that one more time.
A yes vote will mean that there will be no action taken this evening on the policy.
We would vote yes to table it, no to not table it.
Correct. That's correct.
Right.
A yes vote will table the motion, and as a result, there will be no moving of the abolishment of the policy. Yes will table. A no will get us to the vote on the motion to abolish. If everyone's clear.
They're clear. Roll call?
Mrs. Brand?
No.
Mrs. Coslino?
Yeah.
Mrs. O'Sullivan? That was a no. Mrs. Thurman?
Yes.
Mrs. Venatoli?
No.
Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Amoroso?
No.
Mrs. Lambert?
No.
Motion to table does not carry.
Now we're back to the main motion, which was the motion to abolish policy 5756 as a first reading.
Ready for the roll call?
Yes.
Okay. Mrs. Brand?
Yes.
Mrs. Coslino?
No.
Mrs. O'Sullivan?
Yes.
Mrs. Thurman?
No.
Mrs. Venatoli?
Yes.
Mr. Williams?
No.
Mr. Amoroso?
Yes.
Mrs. Lambert?
Yes.
Motion carries to abolish for the first reading of the policy.
Now we need to have a round table and understand that you have another vote in November You can change your vote. Do your homework, talk to your constituents. I have for months on end. I recommend you all do the same and come back prepared in November.
Rest of H.
Anybody have an issue up here with the November 2nd date, if that's what we're supposed to get around doing?
It's a Thursday.
Problem is, you guys take these conference and 3 days off. Yeah, now they have to. Couple days before that, November 2nd, literally what we say.
Right, November 2nd? Okay.
I'll find somewhere, even if it's in your backyard.
I'll ask Kelly tomorrow. I'll tell her you're reaching
Is
out.
everybody on the board okay with the November 2nd date for a roundtable and spreading the word?
It would be at night. It would be at night.
We can only have 3 board.
Elena's okay.
We can't have 5 board
No,
members present.
4
at that
board
meeting,
members
so we're
present.
gonna have to have a sign-up sheet or a lottery.
Or we can break into smaller groups.
Right, we went, what, was that Barcala? We went into room? No, West Freehold. We went into a different room so that we were not,
We used 3 or 4 different rooms.
right, so that we were not all together. But, right, I guess we didn't consider that for the potential October 16th date, because that was going to be at the in the Barcala gym. So I guess if we can secure a location where that is possible, we can have more than 4 board members,
Yeah, we can.
as long as we're spread out throughout the building, Michael? It's enough to give you anxiety. I know, it gives me a little anxiety. I won't attend. I'll just keep it clear. I don't, okay. Hello? Okay.
No,
Now the rest of curriculum.
Depends on the size of the wall, the height of the wall.
Different rooms.
We were on separate islands. There was no.
Yeah.
Exactly.
We were in
Yeah.
completely different spots.
Like
The block of the wall.
someone was in a library, someone was in the gym.
When they checked in, we told
okay.
them where to go.
So,
Based on their registration.
as long as you're not conversing with each other, they're
No.
not violating the sunshine law.
No, board members went to their respective locations as soon as they walked in, and when people checked in, we said, okay, you're
Yep.
you're with Mary and the media.
As long as you guys stay separate and you don't converse about board business.
You can do that. All right, do you want me to move their curriculum?
Yes, please.
Yes.
All right, we did meet this evening. Present was, Mrs. Montgomery, Mr. Williams, Mr. Amoroso, myself, and Mr. Dickstein joined us for a portion. We discussed the items on the agenda. We had the NJSLA presentation. By the way, thank you for putting that together. That was very important information for this board to consider. Title I policies that are on the agenda. There are 3 Title I schools. They will be listed under the policy. Sorry.
No, I messed up. September 28th, we had a professional development day that was early release. And this is kind of what Mrs. Montgomery was talking about in terms of our diving deep into data. Our staff actually analyzed the evidence statements from the NJSLA in each building. And so they saw where any potential weaknesses were with the students and got to really familiarize themselves with how that data looks and how it can be used to drive instruction. We discussed the 2-year math acceleration pathway that we have created. This is to give our students in middle school a pathway to geometry for those students that qualify. And right now there are several students on that track. We discussed the revised district mentoring plan and the revised district personal development plan, which is on to be amended because of the Chapter 9 requirements, which were just updated.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Again?
And CUSAC.
Oh. Why? Can I ask why? Like, what's driving it to happen so soon again?
No, we just needed to revise our documents to be aligned with the new requirements of the chapter that was adopted this summer.
Right.
And the impetus for us to do it
most immediately is because CUSAC is coming.
Okay.
We could have in other, under other circumstances, we could have waited and just done it next year,
Okay, okay.
but not CUSAC.
Nope.
Hate those those words.
I would like to move for first reading the policy regulations listed. I would also move the course reimbursement as listed, the teacher practicum observation and placements as listed, the revised professional development plans and mentoring plan as listed, the HIB district and school grades for the 2022-2023 school year, the affiliation agreement with Keene University, and that's it.
Okay, any questions? Can I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Do you want?
Abstention on number 5, item 1.
Number 5.
Aye,
top
item
one.
1.
All right.
Okay, motion carries.
Yep, thank you.
Motion carries. Moving on to finance, facilities, and transportation. Ms. Vendatoli.
The Finance, Facilities, and Transportation Committee did meet this evening. In attendance were Mr. DeVita, Mrs. Lambert, Mrs. Brand, myself, Mr. Dickstein, for a little while. We discussed a transportation issue, and the committee discussed a solution. We discussed the 24-25 budget. Some items for the 24-25 budget include staffing, workers' compensation, and equipment needs. We went over the construction update. We discussed the progress of the current HVAC projects and the ROD grant motions on tonight's agenda. We also discussed adding a few items as an alternate bid to the HVAC projects that we will bid out this spring. For facilities issue, we discussed a number of critical facility equipment issues. They include the trailer at the depot for the TWU staff, HVAC unit vents, and one of the vehicles for property services. We went over our facility use policy. Multiple groups are using the same permits for fields, and we may have to revise the regulations at an upcoming meeting. Food services, we discussed the revisions to policy 8500. The most significant change is that in 24-25, we will be offering breakfast in our schools. Currently, the ECLC is the only school that we are mandated to offer breakfast. And then we went over the agenda items. That's it.
You want to move the rest?
Oh, yeah, okay. So hot, leave me alone. Agenda item, I'm going to move the Secretary and Treasurer's report, item number 3, as listed. Number 4, bills and claims as listed. Thank you, Mrs. Brand, for doing them. Total bills in the amount of $1,875,184.57. The 929 payroll of $2,491,732.75, and the 1013 payroll, $2,495,769.40, a grand total of $6,862,686.72. Number 5, travel and related expenses as listed. Number 6, transfers as listed. Number 7, standard operating procedures and purchasing manual as listed. Number 8, mandatory use of direct deposit as listed. Number 9, the nursing services as listed. Number 10, approval of preliminary eligible costs for state project number 1660-021-23-R501, HVAC upgrades. Number 11, approval of preliminary eligible costs for state project number 1660-025-23-R501, HVAC upgrades. Number 12, we approve the co-op bid with CDW Government Inc. for 23-24. Number 13, the IDEA Basic Fiscal Year 2024 grant. Number 14, the ARP grant. Number 15, honoraria for Joseph J. Katina School. Thank you. In the total amount of
$20,000.
$20,000. Thank you. Number 16, a donation from the Laura Donovan School PTO to the Laura Donovan School in the amount of $25,000 to be used on the sound system.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Any questions?
The transfer for the number 3, the printing contract charges, why weren't they invoiced in 22-23?
The company didn't send the invoice. We had what we thought it was all, and when we spoke to the company, they said they had some employees that weren't there anymore, and they missed sending it out to us. So we owe them the money as per the contract.
And there's no you snooze, you lose.
I tried it. I tried that. That defense didn't work. And it's not ideal. I'm not happy with it. The fact is, I could have spent the money and closed out last year's budget, and we were getting some bills. And then they said, "Oh yeah, by the way, person left them. This is what it's here for." So we had breakage from our property insurance, and that's where it came from to cover this expenditure. Does that work in court?
Snooze, you lose. Snooze, you lose defense.
Any other questions? Can I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. 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 Okay. Motion carries. Okay.
You gave Mindy Bailey sigh.
I did. I Mindy. I did. Oh, great.
You rolled your eyes as well.
I did. So, if Mindy's watching, hey Mindy. Hey Mindy, yes, I'm fine. I roll my eyes. Moving on to old business, new business, president's remarks. I will refrain from all of that. We already discussed a roundtable on November 2nd. Check your emails from all the buildings to participate in any of the elementary and middle school events and fundraisers. I was alerted about a Nothing Bundt Cake Buntlet fundraiser from Erickson. Yeah, so if you feel like getting fatter, go right out. It's really good. No, so keep an eye out for all the schools, all the events, all the fundraisers. We get the emails with the updates. I'm just going to urge you to do that.
Is there anybody not getting the updates? They come about weekly. When you open them, embedded in the s'more, embedded in the s'more is typically
right
the
bulletin
fundraiser or something.
Right. And in the newsletter, we'll give you the updates to some fundraisers if they're listed in the actual update.
Problem with email in general. I don't think it's specific to that situation, but I know I have to resolve it.
You have what I had. I told you that I had that once before too.
Going to Jen Patton's up until about 2 weeks ago, a month ago, give or take.
Nobody fixed. There was something wrong with the website.
Yeah, so,
So,
When they clicked,
okay.
there were two websites.
So in light of the fact that we have an executive session and we will possibly take action after it, I'm going to move right on to the second opportunity for public participation. If anyone would like to address the board, please do so. Please write your name and address on the sign-in sheet and state your name and town for the record. Statements, no, I'm skipping right over it.
Skip right over it, Ms. Hall, you do that.
Statements to be limited to 3 minutes in length and should not be obscene or defamatory in nature.
Not really a public participation, but my name is Lisa Johnston. I'm the president of our Freehold Township Education Association, so I'm doing a public service announcement. We are having our Meet the Candidates night on Thursday, this Thursday, the 19th, at 7 o'clock. We sent out the flyer again today, and that is the one with the correct Zoom link. There was a flyer sent about 3 weeks ago that does not have the right Zoom link. So I wanted to make a public service announcement that we are sponsoring Meet the Candidates nights for our board candidates. Please use the one that came out today. That is the link to use. I will probably mail something out to the entire district tomorrow with the correct link as well, because we want as many people as possible to be hearing what our candidates have to say. So short and sweet. Everyone's going to hopefully have a good evening because it's now 11:15. And you guys have executive session. Yes, exactly. I get up at 5 o'clock to get to that middle school because it starts at 7:15. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Jeff, you wanted to mention something?
I don't know if this qualifies as new business or old business, but the Heartland game, God willingly, will be played Monday night at Open at 6. So again, I'm not sure if it's old business or new business because we've canceled.
23rd?
Yes, Monday night, the 23rd.
Monday night, the 23rd. At what time? 7 o'clock?
6 o'clock at Open Hut.
I'm shot. Okay, Open Hut. Okay.
And also, school pictures are coming home. They look awesome. Great job as always.
Yes, you may. Sorry. I didn't see that you wanted to. I thought no one else wanted to speak.
So I just, one is I want to thank everybody, because I know these are difficult decisions that we have to make. And I just wanted to make one more comment to Mr. Williams. You're talking about how our parental rights violated based on this policy. I guess your question was, how are we not having our parental rights honored with this policy 5756? Because it's in writing, in a policy stating that we have no rights to know what our children are doing. That's how it's being violated.
Not really. That's not really what it says. It just says parental consent is not required.
No, it says notification also in the
parental
policy.
notification. There's no affirmative duty to notify.
Right, exactly. So since it's in the policy, now it's up to the school to notify us or not. You don't have a duty to notify us. So that's, I'm just trying to say, the reason why, because it's in writing, it's in a policy. So if you want to remove the policy and have a, you know, like if you understand the child's family is, the kid is very distraught to talk to his parents, you know, you can kind of work with that and try and get the kids together with the parents to discuss any problems they may have. But the point is, when it's in writing and it's in a policy, in a document, we're signing our rights away when we say we recognize that policy and we agree with it. So that's why. So our rights are being minimized. So anyway, that's all I wanted to say. Thanks.
Thank you.
May I also add a thing?
State your name again, please.
My name is Josh Gerstein. I was up earlier.
Did you get them?
I just wanted to say really fast that they can still, like, you can say that you talk to them to try and set up so that they feel comfortable talking to the parents, right? That's not like being tabled, like that wouldn't stop. That's been going on the whole time. If the student doesn't feel comfortable, they don't have to, but you can still keep working with them. And if they say, hey, I don't feel comfortable, you won't force them to, but it's still an option. It's not taking any of the rights away because you're not making them do anything. So just wanted to point that out. Also, I still haven't heard any answer to that either. But thank you for your time. I really appreciate all of you coming on and dealing with so many people and so much things going on. I understand this is a very divisive topic, so thank you so much.
Thank you. Round table. November 2nd.
Location, November 2nd.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hi. Jacob Pender, Rutgers, New Brunswick, and I'm just back up here to say that I'm very disappointed in the transparency of the school board tonight. The lack of putting 5756 on the agenda has confused many. It was not brought up during new business. It was added to the agenda during the meeting. That gives the public no time to come out and discuss something that is not, it's not even brought up in new business. You changed the agenda as you were voting on it. That is not transparency. We, as taxpayers, fund the schools of New Jersey. I don't know about anyone else, but I am very disappointed that this was brought up to a vote, not just under new business, I can understand that, but added to the agenda. So basically that means that people can see an online agenda, come to the school board meeting, or not come because they don't see something on it, and then the school board can change the agenda at the time of the meeting. They can add anything they want, take away anything they want, vote on it during the meeting. That is not appropriate, that is not transparency, and that is not how a school board should be run. Thank you.
It's ironic again. I wanted to finish my statement. But first, I wanted to say that all of you here are appreciated. You all wear different hats. You go home your parents. You go home your spouses. You've got your jobs. You have your position on the board. And I hope that you will understand that I wear different hats. I'm a parent. I'm a league volunteer. Anyone that received any text messages from me or emails from me, I want to make it very clear that as a league volunteer, every candidate gets the exact same script, which is written by the organizer. If I happen to have been the tech person last night on the forum, all I'm doing is copy pasting a message that goes to a candidate that says, I'll be here if you have a problem with your mic or whatever happens. You don't feel well and you have to leave. I do that, and I take that, my position with the League of Women Voters, very, very seriously and protect that reputation. But as a parent, I am not willing to wait until a child does commit suicide because somebody did something. And I just want to read the very last part of the statement from the League. And this was written from the state level, the Board of Directors for the New Jersey League of Women Voters. It's important to note that the policy 5756 is not a standalone policy, but part of a concentrated effort trying to repeal it, to undermine public education. In addition to attacks on LGBTQ and student plus student rights, the campaign includes book bans, attacks on sexual education, and attempts to rewrite American history by prohibiting accurate and necessary conversations about race and equity. The League of Women Voters cannot stand by while a small minority uses our classrooms as political backgrounds at the expense of our students and our country's future. This is also an attack on our public school educators and has served to drive highly trained, experienced teachers out of the field. It's time to say no to these attacks, time to support our educators and stand up for our children. We urge the Board of Education to reject the proposals under consideration tonight, which you already have done the first read. I hope that you will all, the political divisiveness that has been ramped up throughout all of New Jersey, and I've probably been to 20 different Board of Ed meetings, and I have seen people say things that are just so outrageous and unnecessary and hurtful. I don't want to be the one parent that didn't stand up and say something until a student committed suicide.
I'm sorry. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and I hope you will consider your position.
Would anyone else like to address the board? Okay. Seeing none, I'd like to thank all of you who came out to participate tonight for your input. We value your input. Please, I would remind you all that to look on our website to confirm the community roundtable. And at this point, I'm going to make a motion to go into executive session. Can I have a second? Second. Okay. Whereas pursuant to NJSA 10-412B, the Board of Education may exclude the public from that portion of a public meeting at which the board discusses any of the matters described at NJSA 10-412B items 1 through 9. Now therefore be it resolved that in accordance with the provision of the Open Public Meeting Act, the Board of Education shall conduct a closed session pursuant to the personnel and legal exceptions prescribed by NJSA 10-412 for the purposes of discussing a personnel matter. It is anticipated the length of time of this executive session will be 45 minutes and that action may be taken in public after the executive session. Be it further resolved that the said discussion may be disclosed to the public when the reasons for discussing and acting upon it in closed session no longer exist. So at this point, we're going to go into executive session. Action may be taken at the end of executive session on the item that we discuss while in executive session. We hope that it should take no longer than 45 minutes. So I have to ask you all to wait out in the hallway. We're going to take a 2-minute recess.
I don't think so.
No?
There's 45 minutes that I don't think so.
No, I can't get out of my house.
How you doing?